Here.
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 Thank you. If you'll join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next is election of officers. Typically, the outgoing chairs get together and recommend a slate. Of course, the vice chair typically moves up to the chair and the treasurer moves up to the vice chair, and then we have a conversation of chair. When Mayor Tesso and I got together, we looked for a recommendation to have the folks that haven't served previously on there. And we offered it to, in this case, Chairman Norris, but he decided to decline. So we came up with our next person in charge. And we did similar to RTA, which we'll get to. But this is the slate of candidates. Next was Supervisor Scott, and he agreed to serve. It's the will of the council. And at this time, I'll entertain a motion to. Okay. Any further discussion? All those in, but yes, sir.
I'll just point out that I was a teacher, but I was never a math teacher. So you're now making an English and social studies teacher your treasurer. I am not responsible.
I'll have amended a motion then to no.
In that case.
Thomas, that's not for the record. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. So at this time, I have the distinct honor to turn it over to my colleague, the mayor of Oro Valley, who beat us in the census, Mayor Joe Winfield.
Thank you, Mayor Murphy. And I believe we're going to make a presentation. On behalf of the council, we would like to present to you this token of our appreciation for your leadership. It's gone by all too quickly.
All too quickly, especially for you. Awesome. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's always a great. I want to open the five.
I'm just going to take a quick picture if you don't mind, but
So maybe you want to.
Always on bubble wrap. It's always a challenge. Very nice gift. Handmade. By Helen Weaver. Very nice. All right. Good. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, if I may, on behalf of staff, we would like to obviously acknowledge and thank the outgoing chair as well. So thank you for your leadership and appreciate your engagement.
Well, I appreciate all the staff's help. None of us could do it, I would say, without that. So all of you on my left, I appreciate the hard work.
All right. Well, we'll carry on. Let's go to item 4 of the agenda, which is call to the audience. David Zenga will.
Speakers are limited to 3-minute oral presentation and may submit written comments of any length for the council's file. Call to the audience is limited to 30 minutes. Individual council members may respond to criticism made by those individuals who have addressed the council. However, the council will not discuss or take action on a matter raised during a call to the audience that is not already on the agenda. Let's walk up.
Don't see her yet.
We'll proceed to call it. Thank you, caller. You are now live with the PAG Regional Council. Please start your comment by stating your name for the record. After that, you'll have 3 minutes to address the PAG Regional Council. At the 2-minute mark, I will politely cut in and request that you wrap up your comments. You may now proceed with your comment.
Good afternoon. This is Emily Yetman, Tucson resident, and here I'm living South Pleasant Street, Alliance. This morning, I looked at the Arizona Daily Star, betting that there would be at least one headline about traffic crash because there almost always is. And sure enough, there was this one about a man trying to get across a wide roadway by foot on Tucson's south side and not making it. This man is now the 11th person lost on our streets already just this year, and we're not even a month in. Tucson streets have become increasingly unsafe for everyone using them, people in cars, people on foot, people on bikes and on motorcycles. I not only think of that poor man's family, I also think of the shock and horror for the person driving and the fact that they now have to live with knowing they unintentionally took someone's life as they live out the rest of theirs. And I'm here to tell you that crashes like this have a lot to do with the RTA. I know because as someone who has spent the past decade working with Tucson communities, I've heard over and over the kinds of things that people want and need to get around safely. Traffic calming, lighting, safe crossing, push button signals. Every single Tucson council member has heard these kinds of requests, and I've witnessed the Department of Transportation's frustration with an inability to do anything despite knowing exactly what could be done. And it all has to do with money. When the RTA board decided in 2014 to reduce categorical funding and sweep all other non-RTA transportation revenue coming into our region to complete the major roadway projects, it completely destroyed the city's ability to respond to the crisis unfolding within its streets. Federal money could have been funding safety and education programs, schools these past 8 years, giving youth skills to be safe while walking and biking, and also to be safer drivers when they're of age. Instead, those same funds went to finish more wide roadways that recreate the same unsafe conditions to put every one of us at risk every day. And Tucsonans were even consulted when this decision was made. They certainly did not vote on it. To me, that is definitely not a promise delivered.
Apologize
This
for
morning,
the
I also-
interruption. You have 1 minute remaining. Thank you.
This morning, I also read an exciting announcement about major federal transportation funding heading our way to build complete streets that feel safe and are safe for people. Based on RTA's track record, I have little confidence that that money will see its intended use. Tucson Mayor Romero and Council are right to request weighted representation. They're doing their job to prevent further taxation without representation. When their voice isn't loud enough, when the majority of the population is not equitably represented in this decision-making process, it results in a misalignment of what people need and what gets built. And ultimately, here in Tucson, it results in more unnecessary loss of life.
I apologize for the interruption. You're at 3 minutes. Please bring your comments to a close.
I encourage you to take Tucson's request seriously. That curbing death on our streets is of regional value should be obvious to everyone. Thank you.
We have Mrs. Beth Walker present. Will now address the regional council.
Hello, it's good to see you. And my husband, 2 or 3 hours before he passed away, asked me to come in and see you all. He was worried about how the RTA was going on. And he said, no, just bring it up to heaven with you, okay? So that's what I'm here for. He was last year basically unable to travel and do much, and but I was his chauffeur, and he thought I drove too slowly, but he checked on everything that was going on with the streets and building in the community, because he wanted to, I guess, do his stamp of approval on it, which he did every time we drove around. But I wanted to tell you that because I know, I don't know if you all had time to go through the paper this morning, but the whole paper was about RTA. And so I understand that you're in a stressful time going through all of this. And what I wanted to tell you was before I met Bob, 40 years ago almost now, I was working for CARE, the international agency. And my job was to solve situations like this around the world. And the last one that I did was with the big desert in this south of, in Africa, and another nearby agency that they were fighting each other. We had guns straying there because I had a huge ship filled with food that they both wanted. And so it was interesting because I didn't think that I had much ability to bring about peace for a family was not getting along. These two agencies were not getting along. And the way one gets it is with, you've got a bigger umbrella, a bigger over here that you can offer them and they get along. And I just wanted to know that I think that's part of Bob's, how he did things. I've seen some real tricky things that Bob did to get progress here in the community. And so all I can do is bring from him. And thank you for all the work you guys are investing in the work that you do. But having at one point run the Children's Museum here, it was terrible because we were just city, but 50% of the people that used the Children's Museum were not city. And it was very difficult to provide the money to keep the Children's Museum going. And that's another thing I would compliment all of you about. But I just wanted to tell you that I know you're in a tough bind, and I hate the fact that some of the things that I was reading in the paper today, that you all are being held up for not making good decisions or not getting their decision. And so I hope that you all can find the answer here. And when I get to heaven, I will tell Bob that you all have moved forward with this by then. So but he said, it was just a few hours before he died. He said, there's two things I want you to do. One is to go to RTA and you straighten it out and tell them they can do it. And the second thing was, I don't know if y'all knew this, but he had wanted for years to have a downtown park. And he had been working on it. And he had met neighborhoods and he had done much to make that happen. And he kept stepping people aside from using the space that he thought would be fun. So he just kept control of that space. And so my job now is to go and raise money for the children's park in downtown Tucson. But if there's anything I can do to help you, I just want to tell you, it's special to have all of you working on a project that Bob, I think, really started. So thank you for investing yourselves and looking forward to making our community one of the best in the world. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, at this time, we have no more callers in the queue or in person.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zengel. We'll close call to the audience and go to item 5 on the agenda, which is approval of the December 9th, 2021 meeting minutes.
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve in a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. We'll go to item 6, consent agenda. This is informational items. Supervisor Scott.
I wonder if we could divide the question and discuss 6A separately, please.
Okay, there'll be no action taken, so we can just go into discussion on, any of these are open for discussion.
Thank you.
Supervisor Scott, 6A.
I had some questions that Pima County staff wanted me to ask with regard to this item. And rather than them being responded to now, what I'd appreciate is if we could get a written response addressed not just to me, but to the other members of the regional council. First, and I can email these to Ms. Ontiveros as well after the meeting so that staff has them. The first question is the actual HERF revenues for fiscal year 21 exceeded what was programmed in the TIP. Can PAG provide a report on how much extra HERF 12.6 was distributed to the region in fiscal year 21 versus what was programmed in the TIP? Second, current year, fiscal year 2022, are coming in well above what is programmed in the TIP. When and how will this be programmed? Third, concerns were raised during the development of the 2022 to 2026 TIP that HERF revenue projections recommended in summer 2020 were too low. Over a year later, this issue still has not been resolved. And fourth, the table below, and again, I will send this to Ms. Ontiveros, provides a straight line estimate of how much more HERF 12.6 and 2.6 may be coming to the PAG region this fiscal year, since all 5 years of the TIP have too low / too conservative estimates. There is a significant amount of HERF funding that should be added to the TIP. So again, if I could submit those in writing and get a response in writing addressed in memorandum form to myself and the other members of the regional council, that would be appreciated.
Sure, Mr. Chair, Supervisor Scott, we'd be happy to do that. And obviously we'll make sure we reach out to staff as well if we have any additional questions.
Very kind of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Discussion on any of the other consent items? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 7, discussion regarding establishing performance evaluation criteria for the executive director for the upcoming year. Mayor Murphy.
Yes, as it was recommended and approved by the regional council at our, what was our last, I think it was our last meeting, maybe the meeting before, to come up with a tool to be utilized. And there was a group of 5, 4 participated in that process to come up with a tool, and the tool itself is in your packet. And all of us had input on the group that got together to do this and made some changes to it. I think it's a good starting tool to start with. I've done a lot of these over the years, over my Air Force career and on the school board and on the council. And for my opinion is you work with it, you give it a chance, and it always can be modified if during the future evaluation process, maybe something gets missed that is of concern to somebody. But I think we came up with a good tool, and thanks to Mayor Winfield and others that helped participate in that. But that's the tool that we came up with, and I'd make a motion that we approve that.
Mayor Honey.
I'll second that if I could make a comment.
Yeah, we'll have discussion. So there's a motion on the table to accept this evaluation tool, seconded by Mayor Honey. So now we're open for discussion. Mayor Honey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no issue with a new evaluation performance thing. I just want us to remember we approved this today. It starts today and moves forward. You can't use a new evaluation tool and go backward. So I just want to make sure what we have been using so far has worked. And I did support this, obviously, but I think the new evaluation tool should go from this point forward for the next year for evaluation.
Other comments?
Chair.
General Maxwell.
Thank you for all the folks that worked on putting this together. And I agree with what Mayor Honey just said, is this is a new tool that we're putting in place. And any person who's having a assessment tool put towards them should have the opportunity to achieve in accordance with that, what they're being assessed on. That being said, I think this is a very good start, but I'd like to recommend that there's another thing that we could add to it. And that is, Mayor Murphy, you acknowledge your time in the military, and I'm going to kind of go to something that I got from there too. And that is, this does a very good job of what I'd call making sure that we've got all of our T's crossed and we're not in trouble, we're doing everything legally. I think there's also the opportunity to not only use as an assessment tool, but also to bring improvement to the position and to the individual. And that's a 360 assessment of some sort. Obviously, I don't have one prepared right now, but there is a way for a 360 assessment because it provides feedback to the executive director, the CEO, the leader of any organization, not only feedback from us, because as part of a 360 assessment, all the board members would be assessing the performance with some specific questions to the executive director. But so would, in this position, much like the position that you all hold, you're interacting with a lot more people than just the board. And there is feedback that through a 360 process that provides not only the supervisors, but those who work for the individual to assess the performance. And probably more importantly in this position, because it's such a critical role to the community, it provides input from designated and selected individuals who work closely with him from outside entities, that the work with the executive director is critical. And it provides it again, it's just a tool. It's not a vote. It's not like everybody else gets determined. Ultimately, the assessment results of the executive director position comes from us as members of the board. But a 360 assessment brings a lot more into consideration than just making sure we're doing everything legally. And I think the executive director's position is incredibly important to the region, to all of our communities, and to his organization. It's a much bigger, I think without having some further assessment tool, we're really downplaying the importance and significance of Rod McGinney's role. It's critical.
General Maxwell, Mayor Romero.
Thank you, Mayor. Chair. I absolutely 100% agree with the comment from the general, and would like to make sure that we make it part of the direction to proceed, because I agree that this assessment is the bare minimum that we need to ask our executive director to perform. I believe that there should be metrics in terms of performance and what we expect. 21st century forward-thinking, forward-looking organizations such as the FEMA Association of Governments and Rta to have. So, General, I don't know if you want to add to the motion, because there's a motion and a second on the floor, to make sure that we have continued contribution in terms of the tool, the assessment tool that we are going to use.
Well, first, in regards to Mayor Romero and Chairman, since it was that question asked for me, I'll address that question. I am willing to make that in the form of an amendment with the initial motion to add further to 360, but I want everybody to understand what we're doing now is we're delaying the process of having a metric and tool in place. And I do reiterate what Mayor Coney said. You cannot put a tool in place, rate somebody on them, then judge them against that. You've got to provide opportunity for whoever is being assessed the opportunity to achieve, because quite frankly, there's a lot of things that I could say if I was in the executive director's seat. I'm not sure he knows what all of our desires for him to do in that position. So some of this, as we go through, is falls on us if we're not truly being directed very clear. He knows what the legal obligations are. If there's things we expect out of him and we've not told him that, that falls on us. That does not fall on any individual. So Mayor Murphy, if you would include a further development of a 360 to your motion, to approve this.
Right. I'm not sure yet, because I'd want to have some more discussion, because I think I'd be open for it, but this is the first time I'm hearing about it. And our charge was to come up with this. And part of what I thought the 9 of us do is represent the million people in our community. And I've always been open. What I wouldn't want, let's say down in the town of Salarita, if somebody was being evaluated in the town, I would want to take input as the mayor from the Tucson Chamber, for instance. But I'm not sure I'd be in favor of wanting them to be part of, because I don't understand the formal process that's being presented. So I'm open for that dialogue, but not for me, not at this time for that particular amendment, because it wasn't ever couched during this process.
Then in that case, Mr. Chair, I'd like to offer an alternative amendment. That is that we table this until it's been further discussed. I understand the need and the desire for many members around this table to get to having an assessment tool. But I think there are glaring things missing from the current proposal. We don't mention the accomplishment of the vision of PAG. We don't mention the accomplishment of the mission of PAG. There's a lot. That position, much like the positions you all hold, much like the position I have, we've got a mission and a directive, and it's incredibly important. And to minimize it by just saying, are we doing what's legal, I think is not sufficient. So I'd offer an alternative motion that we table this topic and continue working on it through either conversations or discussions on what it could look like, because I think as it's written, it absolutely assesses, does the executive director work within the lanes that the legalities of operating in the MPO, PAG, and the RTA. And I think we all know that he does a very good job at doing that. But is there more to that position that is not being rated that maybe some folks would like to see?
Would you like to make that in a form of a motion?
So I'd move that we table this topic and continue discussion on a more thorough assessment.
I second the motion.
Okay, well, I also have a comment, Mr. Chair. I agree with all you that, for the last few terms, we've struggled with this itself. And to a lot of degrees, he's, I think, aware of that. Let's just be fair about that. But I think you guys are right. We really haven't set the parameters and really what the expectations are. One time in the past, did he meet this? Did he meet that? Is he meeting these? And he probably does. But we, as a board, if we're expecting more or want to direct them a certain way to take a look at things, then that's why I agree with tabling it and then having a further discussion, because we've tried for 2 terms or 3 terms now to define, and within ourselves have had some changes. But I think right now, I think it's only fair to the executive director to make sure that if these are it and not, put too many constraints or restraints, and the staff and him know which way this board is going now. I think it's the fairest way to do it. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that comment. To Mayor Honey.
Thank you. I agree with comments Chairman Upicio said. The one issue I have is who is going to set these metrics? If you start getting further in the weeds and you start narrowing down requirements or needs, it could get pretty sticky. Generally, when you are doing an evaluation on a CEO or a chairman or something like that, it is fairly open. That doesn't mean you can't have inner discussions on them. If we start setting metrics, who's going to set those metrics? And where are we going to get them? It's my metrics and somebody else's here's metrics might be quite different in making an assessment of an administrator or CEO. So I don't have a problem with tabling it and doing some metrics, but I'm interested in how those are going to be assessed or designed.
Mayor Murphy.
Yeah. Yes, and that was going to be my comment on, since Joe Maxwell brought it up, because we had a group before. So what was your thinking on where would comments be sent to and to who and brought back? And
So, Mayor Murphy, Mr. Chair, what I'm really looking at is kind of an idea of a 360 assessment, which is actually, to Mayor Honey's concern, it is anything but specific and restrictive. It's actually broad. It takes a lot of good looks. It focuses on things like, what is PAG's mission? What is PAG's vision? Does the executive director conduct himself internally with focus on that mission? It's really broad. And you've got to remember, what we're not looking for in a 360 assessment is never, if it's used properly, it's never something that you sit and go, oh, because as leaders, we're all going to have people that dislike what we're doing, period. We're going to have people that are not going to come in and saying you're doing a great job. And that's part of the art of the assessment, because before this, it was all art. It was all what we felt. And so it's not going to be in the weeds. It's not going to be specific. 360 assessments are pretty broadly used tools. It's pretty easy to set up, even if it's just initially on those high level, vision and mission statements. And what is it that we'd like to see from the executive director? And I honestly don't believe it's something that changes from board to board. I think once we've got one in place and once we all have the opportunity to review it, and I'm talking not just come back with a proposal, but this will probably take 2 meetings. Have one, and I'll be willing to step forward and help work on it to develop a 360 proposal, have a meeting where we sit and talk about it and determine if there's parts of it we don't like, or if there's parts that we like. And to include, we're going to have to determine who would it be if we go to those contemporaries, his peers, to ask. But that's going to be something we're going to have to determine who those peers are. And that actually the executive director will have a lot of input to that, because here are the people I work really closely with to accomplish PAG's vision and mission in the region. But it's actually not as specific. We expect them to do this. It's much broader and gives us more insight to not only what we see, but what the people that we, and I do believe that the executive director already influences within the community to get our mission done. I don't think there's a negative to it. But it's only a tool. Remember, everything's only a tool. Ultimately, the decision's ours.
Mayor Romero.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for a second. I absolutely agree. 360 evaluations are very thorough, and many city managers, county administrators, CEOs, executive directors have to go through that. I think that the director of the PAG RTA is a very important position in our entire region. And so it will also give us, each member jurisdiction, the ability to think about what is it that our jurisdictions view as what the vision and the mission of the PAG RTA are. And so it will give us, I'm willing to work to get this done right. And it is only fair for the executive director to understand what all the member jurisdictions and the community want to see in terms of the vision, mission, and the accomplishments and the goals that we want to pursue as we move forward.
Mayor Murphy.
I was just getting a little lost with that though, because shouldn't there be one vision and one mission statement?
There is.
For us as a collective. I was hearing a little bit that we're all seeing what our mission is or our vision, differently.
I'd ask the executive director, we PAG, and I'm to be naive here, assume we have a mission statement as an organization.
We do, yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
Should we have a vision? That's the one I'm talking about. I'm not talking about our individual organizations. But for example, one of the ones you ask is, a possible thing with how's the collaboration with the executive director? And it would go to the Rta transportation chief, it'd go to your transportation chief. It'd be, who are the people that the executive director routinely works with in this community to accomplish both accomplish the RTA conduct and success and build outs. It's just an assessment, but it's the mission and vision. isn't what we decide. It's what is defined as PAG's mission and vision. It's there. It's kind of like all this information that we've got on this was probably pulled from the statutes and the guidance, the PAG bylaws. Same thing. It takes a look at all those, but the key is, I think it will give us a more thorough understanding. And to be honest, the person that benefits more than anything in the long run is the executive director, because when we see the input and we see our input and we have our discussion, it's not a, okay, somebody says it's good, they don't like it. It's an overall assessment. We will see it all, and it actually supports the job he's currently doing.
Mayor Murphy.
Shut up after this.
It's all good.
Just to be clear though, when I go through or we come in for the feedback session, the assessment at the executive director, I do reach out to our staff, at the different levels.
Absolutely.
For the management committee, I would work with our town manager and, TMC with our public works director. So I just wanted you to know, I'm already doing that. I guess it's an individual 360 within our own municipality, but I just wanted you to know that's already being accomplished from my perspective.
I fully agree, but I can give you several examples through my military career of 360 conducts that if you do them purely inside a single entity or organization versus when you do them throughout the entire wing, you're going to get different perspectives. But I've always found them very valuable to the individual and beneficial. The 360, if there is a 360 assessment is made for improvement in the organization and for awareness. And it's really targeted because part of a 360 assessment will include the executive director filling out his own personal assessment. And that's where he may not know where he's running short, because do we ever really sit down and talk about any of the issues in our feedback session? Or do we say, no, he's doing a great job, we're happy. It is more personal. It is difficult at times. It requires some good conversations, but I think it gives everybody that insight. And my question to you, Mayor Murphy, is exactly what your folks think about. How confident are you about the other 7 municipalities? I don't have a municipality to go to, so I know none of how confident your groups are.
Right.
And I trust you that you're giving my feedback from that, but it'd be really nice to hear that. And now when you've got the disagreements as far as how the performance is going, it gives me a better overall broad perspective of saying, well, I don't see that. And the 360 assessment's a tool that will provide that kind of feedback to us and to the executive director.
I'd like to procedurally, Mr. Benavides, I've got 2 motions on the table. I've got Mayor Murphy, seconded by Mayor Honey. I have a motion to table by General Maxwell, seconded by Mayor Romero and Chairman Vicio. Can you help
Well,
guide me?
Mr. Chairman, the way I would suggest is you already took a motion and a second. I think I'd call it that question and get it out of the way. And then that you have some other motions in place, but that way we'll keep it clean.
Mayor Chair, Mr. Chair, I understand if there's an alternate motion, you move, if you're supposed to vote on the alternate motion, if you kill that, then we go back to the original motion, it's good.
I know we all operate a little differently. That's why I'm checking
You're
in.
the chair.
That's why I'm checking in with this attorney.
You can have a vote to add that portion of General Maxwell's motion to the current motion. You can have a vote on just
That's not,
that.
I'm sorry, procedurally, there's a motion and an alternative motion on the floor that needs to be voted on. And then if that fails, we go back to the original motion. That's how legally we have been instructed by our city attorney.
That's how we would do it in our town
That's how I
council
understand.
meetings.
That's how I understand the process. I didn't mean, this is not the confusion about actual
Well, if
process.
it
and
helps
procedures.
clarify, if the motion is to table it, I will take that as a friendly amendment to table this particular
In
item
that case, I will defer to the original motion of tabling it as a friendly amendment here.
with more discussion to come.
Correct.
And just to clarify, to have your part of your motion also says to incorporate a 360 evaluation tool.
And what I would clarify that, and I will table it to Mayor Murphy, because I understand the concern. But if you're going to amend your motion to table the topic for further discussion on it, and then we can then address
Correct.
the 360 motion. We can address what other tools we may want to incorporate
And or add.
Correct. So I will withdraw my alternate motion if you're willing to take it.
So at the moment, our next scheduled meeting is in March. So we'd be tabling this until March, our March meeting.
If we get out of this meeting without having a.
We'll get out of this. we'll get out of it. I'd like to just clarify, maybe Mr. Mulkey, you could speak to the next steps here. We table, what, we had a committee of 5.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'll be happy to. Obviously, as Mayor Murphy mentioned, that was the direction to staff previously to be able to bring the tool that you have in front of you. If this motion passes, we continue doing our work and bring more information back to you at the next meeting. And depending on that conversation, hopefully be able to finalize the decision at that point or at future meeting.
And do we reconvene the group that worked on this, or?
That would be my recommendation, because I've already put a lot of time and effort into this discussion.
Just for clarity, can we identify who that committee was, Mayor Murphy?
Right, yes. Well, it started as our town attorney, our PAG attorney, Mr. McGeamy, yourself, myself, and Mayor Romero. It ended up being the 4 of us working on that.
Yeah, I was never invited. So I was not part of that discussion.
Mr. Chair, I've got a question and maybe Executive Director Williams, I'm perfectly fine with the committee you've got working on it. I assume there's nothing that prevents, in this case, and I'm volunteering to do that, to bring forward a proposed 360 type assessment to you, because by putting that on you to develop, if I'm the one that thinks we should add it. So I would bring that forward for your consideration, and then keep that same committee together to discuss whether it should be included or not, and come back to us.
Okay, thank you, General. That would be much appreciated. Mayor Romero, my apologies if you were not invited to be a part. I think we're extending that invitation at this meeting, so I hope that you can be a part of that committee going forward. We would certainly benefit from your participation. Okay, so we have a motion that's amended the table.
And it needs a second.
What was seconded by, or is this?
Well, it's my
Okay.
original motion.
Okay,
so I think
Mayor
it's
Honey?
I'm fine.
You're in agreement? Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion passes. We'll go to item 8, the statewide 8, statewide 2022 transportation safety projections.
Mr. Chair, David Mitchell is on Zoom, and he's going to give the presentation. Obviously, both David and I are available to answer any questions you may have.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is David Mitchell. I'm here to present an action item to you. This is for the annual exercise of the federal FAST Act program of safety performance projections. And we'll dive right into it. Before we do, I want to do a quick review of the PAG aspirations in terms of safety performance for the region. We have some vision and goals that have been adopted, including some safety targets, and we do track the performance of such performance measures. In our strategic transportation safety vision and plan, we have the aspiration to reduce fatalities towards 0 on our roadways. We put a significant numerical reduction of 7 to 10% every time we program funds to bring transportation projects to the region, and these are all superseded by the strategy that's been identified in our long-range transportation plan, the RMAP. These are the performance targets related to safety that are in the RMAP. These are long-range 2045 targets that we have adopted through public processes. And you can see we've got, we aspire to have significant reductions in both fatalities and serious injuries on our roadways, and including the rates of such. And we also have a special focus on the non-motorized or vulnerable users on the roadways, the pedestrians and the bicyclists. We have significant aspirations to reduce the fatalities and serious injuries on our region's roadways. That's where we stand as a region. The annual exercise in the FAST Act program is to track safety performance for all national roadways, and ADOT participates in the program, as do all the MPOs in the state, PAG included. We participate through a safety projection practice. This is something we've been doing for 4 years, going on our 5th one. At the end of my presentation, I'll be asking for your permission to adopt the ADOT's safety projections for 2022. Again, this is part of the FAST Act. Since 2018, we've been participating by tracking safety performance for the PAG region and adopting the state's annual safety projections. It's more of an administrative exercise than a practice of activity for PAG. The projections represent statewide predictions for where the trends and data are pointing in terms of safety. They are not to replace, to compete, or do anything with the targets that we've established for the region through RMAP. The RMAP targets, again, are the goals of our region, the ones that we aspire to achieve through our programming and planning practices. The performance projections, the methodology uses historical data of the last 5 years and crash data and population VMT figures to forecast a compounded rate of change for the next next year horizon. They use these projections to participate in the FAST Act program, in which the Fed assesses on an annual basis towards achieving the state's goals and projections. The way that PAG participates is we simply adopt the projections that they've established. We recognize their methodology is sound, and if we were to do it ourselves, we would probably use the same data and procedures anyhow. But instead we're able to use as a not a forecasting tool, but a way to see where we might stand in 2 years based on our historical trends. And then we can use that kind of a prediction of those projections to evaluate our actual performance to see if we're on pace to achieve those 2045 targets. Currently, that discussion is being housed in the TPC, and there may be more development from your staff and discussion amongst them as well. But that is all for the PAC stuff. This is strictly for state projections, and I have on the screen now the 5 performance measures that are part of the FAST Act safety program. For the year 2022, the state unfortunately sees a continued increase in the fatalities and fatality rates on the state's roadways. The data that I have in the columns 2 and 3 are for the projected state figures. They do see a continued decrease in serious injuries and serious injury rate. That's been a common trend as well in the PAG region, and is continuing to see a great increase than we saw during the last year's go around. And for the first time in several years, we are seeing a projected decrease in our non-motorized and our vulnerable users on the roadway. ADOT projects a decrease in that for 2022. These are the 5 performance projections. And with that, I will open up for discussion. Thank you very much.
All right, we'll open up the questions. Supervisor Scott, followed by Mayor Romero.
Mr. Mitchell, could you go back to your last slide? I was just curious, how is it that the number of fatalities and fatality rate increases while the number of serious injuries and the serious injury rate decreases? One would think that the two would be connected. So I was just curious about that.
There is some correlation. It's not the full story, but yes, sometimes with the severity of the crash, serious injuries could be upgraded to fatalities. It could be also the increased performance of vehicles and the airbag and different safety features. If used properly, those tend to save lives. And so there's been a common increase in that type of accessory for vehicles. And so I think you're seeing fewer injuries based on those, but the fatalities are unfortunately based on more human behavioral aspects, such as speeding, driving under the influence, distracted driving, and that kind of nature.
So technology would be the most likely cause for the decrease in the last 3 categories, but human behavior is the main determinant for the increase in the first 2 categories.
I couldn't say that for certain. These are statewide trends that we see here. There is a lot of discussion on such matter. There's a lot of influences on fatalities and crashes for that matter on the roadway. It's something that can't be engineered. It's something that can't be just educated or enforced individually. It has to be a combination of all three factors. And unfortunately, we are continuing to see an undesirable trend in fatalities on our roadways.
Mayor Romero and then General Maxwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just so you can hear me, Mr. Mitchell. My question is, are these strictly Arizona numbers? Are these focused in the region? What is the study area that we're discussing?
These are state values. So these are for statewide on all highways and public roadways involving roadway deaths and crashes. So the planning area is the state boundary. We are seeing similar trends in terms of crashes and fatal crashes in national data.
Yeah. Are there any opportunities for funding on technical assistance from ADOT for the particular different areas of our state so that we can decrease these numbers, especially number of fatalities and fatality rates within our system? I'm thinking, of course, this is statewide data, but I'm thinking much more focused in Southern Arizona.
Right.
How
Right.
do we attack this issue?
Yes. Thank you for the question, Madam Mayor. Right now, we have this discussion housed in TPC for discussion on how are we performing in the region? What can we do to counter act that? I don't have an answer for your question specifically. There is a lot of grant funding coming out in the transportation bill that we are watching for as to how it will come to our region. We will see increases to the STIP funding that we receive, but there will also be a lot of grant opportunities. So PAG staff will be out there ready to provide the appropriate data. The data comes from state crash databases. We also have basically an information clearinghouse of best case practices and what other communities, including MPOs, cities, and states are doing nationwide to kind of combat this, because it's going to take a lot of work to reverse this trend.
Mr.
Well,
Chair, if
and
I
we
may,
just
I'm sorry, I was going to answer your question about funding, if I may do that.
I'm still have the
Oh,
floor.
okay. I was going to answer your question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just to stay on Mr. Mitchell's last statement in terms of the concern. We heard the call to the audience in terms of having these fatalities, especially people walking and biking inside the city of Tucson. And I just wonder if there's an opportunity to explore a Vision Zero program. The city of Tucson is looking into pursuing a local Vision Zero designation. And if there is any opportunity for the Pima Association of Governments to pursue that as well, right? Because it's not only local roads, but I'm looking at these numbers and very concerned about the number of fatalities. So that's all I wanted to include. Mr. Mogini, you could take the floor. If you'd
Sure,
like,
Mr.
if the chair will.
Chair, Mayor Romero, I wanted to go back to your original question about the funding. So annually, there is funding available for Highway Safety Improvement Program. Those are typically competitive. We're going to be announcing those here shortly within the next couple of months. Typically, the region has been very successful because we have a safety tool that we've been using to track some of these fatality numbers and the rate. And obviously, you need the data to be able to compete for those funds. And we've been very successful working with all of our partners to be able to bring some of those funds to the region. I believe it was roughly about $9 million last year. So we're going to continue. We're going to continue to do that. We have a really good, robust tool that helps our application process. So our goal is to obviously compete for those funds. And following up to the other question you had, as part of our RMAP process, that's a regional long-range plan. We do have the Vision Zero as part of our goal. We have our goals that we track and monitor, and our hope obviously is to reverse the trend, and that's part of that tool as well, to demonstrate that the trend goals are different, and we anticipate to continue to work towards reversing this trend.
General Maxwell.
Mr. Chair, I withdraw.
This is an action agenda item. Any more discussion?
I just have one more comment. I would side with Supervisor Scott. That was my initial impression too, that technology within the vehicles themselves, probably, I know Mr. Mitchell said we probably can't, decide that's what it is, but I had the same thought that as the technology gets better, unfortunately, you're either dying or your serious injuries are decreasing, because of airbags and multiple other, which I think is a good trend. But the concern is on the fatality, which is probably, I believe, like human behavior is probably the biggest factor of that.
Chairman Diciccio.
Further than going to what Mayor Romero said, I also have a concern, because when you start looking statewide, regional wide, okay, is it on the major highway, freeway, or is it inner city traffic where people are just speeding and, that kind, I don't know, the report shows us that, where are the hot spots? Is it a light that's not synchronized right? Is it the speed too high, or what's the issue other than driver, paying attention to a bunch of things in their phone and that kind of stuff? But I know you can't get to all of that, but for somebody like me, I would like to know if there's more speeding and traffic deaths inside, let's say, Oro Valley or over here in Sahuarita, or is it majorly on the main highways and freeways that we have to watch out for? And even then, I think we should have, once we get a report like this, have not only some kind of campaign that tells everybody this year, this many people died on this highway and the inner cities on the freeway in our region. That way they're aware and conscious that somebody's keeping an eye on them. And not only that, but the old saying is you got to watch out for the other guy all the time. Well, we're the other guys going to watch out for them. And I think that's what these reports mean to me, is how do we let the general public know, once you get on our roads, you should be safe, but we're going to keep you as safe, but you also use that tool to empower them to make sure that they're not a fatality neither, or they're not speeding and that kind of stuff. But that's what I get from this report. And what I would like to see, if it does bring it down to, is it inside the city of Marana? Is it inside the town of Oro Valley, or is it just on the freeway by Sahuarita? Because I go that way most of the time when I'm going to the other side of the border. Those are some of the things that these reports mean to me. I don't know about the rest of the mayors and everybody, but I would like to see how HAG and some of us can have some kind of word out there, or poster or something like that. Buckle up, don't. There are a few, but not a lot. And I think by us being a little bit more conscious of exactly where are the spots at that all of these fatalities are happening, I think we can let our public know. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Morgini?
Yeah, if I may just to add to your observations about the report. Yes, the report is very detailed. It's typically generated from public safety agencies, police officers, when they respond to an accident. That information is uploaded into our report. So we have location of the incident. We have all the details about severity of the incident, whether it was injury, fatality. So all that information is available to your staff. It's available to public safety staff. And that's really one of the reasons that we're able to compete for some of these funds, because we can demonstrate the cause of the accident to the best of our knowledge. And those are the kind of things they're looking for, to provide funding to correct those type of accidents or incidents. So we do have the information, and your staff have access to it. We'll be happy to continue to improve the monitoring of the data and hopefully compete for more funding, because that's the solution.
By adopting this plan, this helps put us in a better position to
adopting this
for funds.
So yes, well, it's a requirement, and by adopting the plan, well, we are obviously consistent with what ADOT is reporting as what they project, And obviously, as part of our RMAP process, we're consistent with our process of monitoring and tracking and trying to reverse the trend.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve, seconded by Mayor Murphy, seconded by Chairman Yucapicio. Any more discussion?
Mr. Chair, just real
General
quick.
Maxwell?
I'm just trying to, so these are the targets that the state has recommended, and that's what we're approving. I mean, it says if we don't accept the state targets correct, then we have to file things and do other stuff.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, Mr. Maxwell, we don't call it targets, we call them projections. There are obviously something that we hope that we don't see.
That's why I asked the question. I mean, to say that we're
Yeah,
going to approve increasing, or sorry, increasing
but
number of
it's,
fatalities for this year is our
Yeah.
target.
no,
X percent.
there are projections and I would even say undesirable projections that we have to monitor and record and be able to work towards reversing the trend.
And because those are projections, I know follow on slides that they didn't necessarily talk about here, talks about if the state misses those projections, then actions are taken.
Exactly.
So it's really just kind of setting, this is the baseline. We better do better than that, if not. Thanks for that. Right, thank you for the explanation. Sorry.
It seems like the first step to a solution is acknowledging that there's a problem, right?
Absolutely. That's not a good problem.
It's not a good problem. Any more discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? The motion passes.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just, Mayor Romero and I are freezing to death over here. I mean, it's about 60 degrees.
Very
Could you
good.
do something with this?
Yes, we can adjust the temperature. Must be
Pretty
safe.
soon, we're gonna be hugging over here. Mayor Honey and I.
Well, you got those vents right above your head there.
It is cold. Are you
So
cold?
cold.
Mayor Tesso
It's
is
a
cold
cold
too,
zone.
so it's a
It's a
cold
cold
zone
zone.
over here somewhere.
I'm a native.
It must be the hot seat. I'm perfectly comfortable.
You're perfectly comfortable. Yeah.
I'm happy over here.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for speaking up. We want everyone to be comfortable. Okay, we'll go to item 8. Item 9, Public Transit Human Services Coordinated Transportation Plan. Janine Sullivan will make the presentation. And there is an action item associated with this agenda item.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the council. A more detailed presentation was provided to Management Committee. So I've adjusted this particular presentation to provide a brief summary. And of course, as stated, this is an agenda action item. So we're going to go ahead and move to slide 2. So the PAG Public Transit Human Services Coordinated Transportation Plan is a federally required plan for the PAG region to provide guidance on the use of federal Section 5310 grants. It serves as the guiding document for the coordinated mobility program by identifying the transportation needs of individuals with disabilities, seniors, and people with low incomes. It provides strategies for meeting those local needs and of course prioritizes services and projects for funding and implementation. The purpose of this plan update is geared around matching priorities, strategies, and resource opportunities. So let me highlight the process steps involved in the development of this plan. So the first step includes the Mobility Coordination Working Group, as this group helped develop and guide the plan, as well as the use of previous surveys and other regional plans. So the Mobility Coordination Working Group meets quarterly during the year, and the meetings allow for the exchange of information and efforts to implement coordination strategies. So the meetings include transportation providers and are open to the public. Some examples of previous surveys and other regional plans that were used include the City of Tucson's 5-year strategic plan, the 2045 Regional Mobility and Accessibility Plan, amongst a few others. The second step was really in the development of service area boundary maps. And so those maps were developed for 49 agencies in the PAG region, and the maps will play a pivotal role in identifying core opportunities for advancing coordination between organizations providing transportation to both older adults and those with disabilities, and the potential integration for support for disabled veterans. And of course, identifying key opportunities for the expansion of services and providing referrals. The third step was really a survey, and it was conducted to better understand the scope and breadth of the agency programs relative to the transportation that they provide in our region. And so 13 agencies participated in the survey. This includes agencies funded by FTA Section 5310 and other participating agencies such as the Pima Council on Aging. A simple example of the benefits of performing steps 2 and 3 are that we're now able to more effectively identify potential transportation options to individuals in need, and such as disabled seniors needing assistance to get to perhaps like a dental appointment, or a disabled veteran who would not otherwise receive services from the Veterans Administration or disabled veterans. The fourth step was determining regional goals and strategies and priorities. And in doing this, the regional focus, associated challenges, and coordination opportunities were outlined in relationship to a variety of categories. And those categories include transportation services, accessibility and rider support, transportation costs, fleet management, training, and then of course, transportation gaps for both urban and rural areas. The fifth step was priorities for implementation of FTA Section 5310 funded projects. And so as part of the plan development, the Mobility Coordination Working Group and the Transit Working Group were tasked with ranking the priority for each of the strategies and associated coordination efforts aligned with the regional goals. The sixth step was really about feedback and public comment period. And so to supplement the working group's efforts, PAG shared the plan draft and public comment opportunity directly with PAG stakeholders, which included 80 human services providers. So PAG sent an email to approximately 8,000 people representing numerous stakeholders and partners on December 9th, with a follow-up approximately a week later. The 30-day public comment period was Monday, December 13th, 2021 through Tuesday, January 11th of 2022. We're going to go ahead and move to the third slide. So the key component in this plan is really a guide for funding decisions. And based on the ranking results of the Mobility Coordination Working Group and the Transit Working Group, and as confirmed by the feedback from the public comment period, the funding prioritization in the plan is for projects that are aligned with maintaining existing fleets in a state of good repair, recruitment, training, and retention of drivers, addressing a regional need or gap, support of mobility management and accessibility initiatives, and then of course, transportation services coordination. And that includes public transit, a nonprofit, private and volunteer-based transportation services. And we'll go ahead and move to the final slide, which is slide number 4, and we'll open it up to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan, for your presentation. We'll open it for discussion. Being no discussion, I have a motion.
Motion.
Second. Okay, motion by Chairman Upicio, seconded by Mayor Murphy to approve to adopt the FY 2023-2026 Public Transit Human Services Coordinated Transportation Plan. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nay. Motion passes. Item 10, voting rights of the PAG Regional Council and RTA Board. And Mr. Mogimi will introduce this item.
Mr. Chair, members of the council, thank you again. As you recall, at your December meeting, we had a really good conversation about some of the options and some of the proposals that have been brought forward to you. At that meeting, the direction from the council was for staff to be able to come back and outline all the proposals we've received or any other proposals that we have received since. So we've been able to put that in a report for you, and it's in your packet. Obviously, we're not going to go over the entire report. We're here to answer any questions you have about the report. Both Mr. Benavides and myself will be able to answer any questions you have that's in the report itself. But I thought it might be helpful to have staff, and David's going to help us to kind of walk through some of the highlights of the report, and then at your pleasure, we can pause and answer questions, or we can wait until the report is, the presentation is completed and then answer questions. So with that, if you don't mind, I'll ask Dave to start the outline, and then feel free to pause and ask questions if you like, and it's completely up to you, Mr. Chair.
Mayor Winfield,
Yes, Mayor Tesso.
I would like to move that the regional council adopt Supervisor Scott's voting structure of having 4 votes for the city of Tucson, 3 votes for Pima County, and 1 vote for each of the remaining jurisdictions.
I'd like to second that motion.
Okay, there's a motion, second, discussion. Mayor Murphy, Mayor Honey.
Well, we haven't even heard, the presentation, so I would not be voting yes on it, and certainly until we heard the presentation and had a good discussion, because some of the, ongoing concerns, and it was nice to have Mayor Walkup's wife here, because part of the magic, I think, that we had to get to where we were in 2006 was that equalization between all the municipalities. I'm still not clear. I thank our PAG attorney. I still think this would require, with that motion, some legislative change from that. I personally don't believe that would be a positive way to go, and I would actually try to do what I could to actually work against that, because I think what I've always tried to do at the regional council, and I think we've gotten away from that, is representing all 1 million people together. I try to check, my hat at the door when I come in, because it's very important. When we came up with this project in 2006, I've always been very proud of promises made, promises kept. I've always been very proud that when the council at the time wanted to make sure all of the projects were funded, no matter who they were, and of course the cities were at the back end of that. So in our town, Mayor Bloomberg at the time agreed to have the other federal and state monies go to complete the projects. We were in support of that because we were in support of the 20-year plan. And even with that motion of going with the 3 and the 2, what I would want to stay away from, because the smaller municipalities could start saying, well, I'm bigger than South Tucson, so does South Tucson get 0.03 vote and I get 0.17? And I think that's a slippery slope that I wouldn't want to go down. We've included the 2 nations back in 2007. I think that would dilute their vote, because, if we're going by proportional share, then where does that stop? Do we take it right to the smallest municipalities? And I think that shows a lack of unity and collegialness. And I think the magic of this, based on what you heard a couple of meetings ago, about 99% of our votes have been unanimous over the past 10 years. And I worry that doing these things will hurt our brand, not only what we've been accomplishing in the past 20 years, 15 of the 20, which have gone really well, but I think it also makes it much, much harder to move forward for the next RTA. I think there are some things that we'll be addressing in the RTA meeting that I would see as compromises, but this is not one that I would be supporting.
Okay, so I've got Mayor Honey, Mayor Romero. Mr. Zinga, why don't you take a seat for the moment? We'll have some discussion, but thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could, I'd love, before we have the discussion and debate on this, I understand there's a motion on the table, but I'd really like to hear what the presentation was.
Yeah.
That's supposed to give us insight.
I would like to bring him up too, but it seemed like folks were eager to be a part of this discussion. So I haven't forgotten Mr. Zinga, and I would like to call him when it seems appropriate. But
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mayor Romero.
I tend to agree with the general. I think it's appropriate. There's a motion and a second on the floor. I would highly appreciate a presentation. I'm fine with that. And then after the presentation, we can all get into discussions.
I mean, I don't know if I need to make an alternate motion to ask Mayor Tesso to hold his motion until after the presentation. I'll do so. I don't know the formalities.
I don't know that it's necessary, but yeah.
Mr. Chair, I defer to you.
Mayor Honey, I've allowed others to chime in here, and you had requested time, so please.
Well, I get my hour in now. You know, I think this is all predetermined. There's been a lot of politicking going on behind the scenes. I thought it was inappropriate to make the motion before we even heard the presentation. And this is a big political football. First of all, to go to weighted voting in the and this is PAG and RTA in this motion. To go to weighted voting in the RTA would have to be approved by the state legislature. Because when the RTA was set up, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Benavides, it was one entity, one vote.
That's the way it is.
And I don't think we can change it without getting the legislature to approve the change. Good luck. You know, trying to get that changed in the legislature. I'll just say that politically as well. I think we're in a position here. We have been meeting on this. I've been meeting with people and talking with people and going places on this forever. PAG and RTA has worked really well. And since RTA is thrown into this vote, you know, when the city of Tucson did not get all their stuff pushed to the back of the RTA, they requested it. They came forward. It was Mayor Walkup, and they wanted the transit done early in the RTA, which ended up being a $200 million project with federal money, RTA money, city of Tucson money, and everything else. And they asked to have their projects pushed to the back. We didn't ask for it, the general group. So that was a request by the city itself to push their projects to the back, and RTA won. You know, the city has gotten over, if you just take population, they got a bigger percentage of the money than their population. If you add transit to the RTA capital projects, it ends up being over 70%. And they're about 54% of the population. So nobody's getting cheated here. I can tell you, I made the statement the other day. I said Marana collects more sales tax than my friends in Oro Valley, Rta, South Tucson, the tribe, and the nation combined. But I'm not asking for more vote either. And I was a big supporter of giving the tribe and the nation a vote, even though you don't collect sales tax on the tribe and the nation for this stuff. Your members do when they spend money in our communities. I understand that. When we start going to a weighted voting system, I think we destroy this organization. I really do. I'm willing to make concessions on other issues. But, you know, you put Marana in a really tough spot. We're a high sales tax collector. In fact, per capita, we're the highest sales tax collector in the county of all the municipalities. And, you know, I don't want extra votes. I don't want my other friends not to get a same vote as me. And I think if we start doing things like this, we're in big trouble. And like I said, you're not going to get it through the legislature to have weighted voting. I can guarantee you that. And, you know, it's just, I think this is something that could destroy the organization. PAG will always be here. The only other entity besides the city that's big enough to be an MPO is Marana. But I could petition the state to become my own MPO and get out of PAG completely, which is legal by state law. And I have friends in the legislature and the governor's office that might do that. I don't want to do that. I want to be part of this organization. But I think we're destroying this organization. I'll reserve some comments for later to keep us from being here till 5 o'clock today, but I am really disappointed in this motion.
Thank you, Mayor Honey. Mr. Zenda, I'm going to call you back to the podium for your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Regional Council. It is a pleasure to speak to you again on this topic following up from September. Once again, my name is David Zinda, and I'm the policy analyst here at Pima Association of Governments. It's also a pleasure to stand before you as a resident of the Southern Arizona community, recent transplant of a few years back. And I just want to echo Mrs. Walkuph's comments and thank you all for your leadership in making this such a great place to live, to work for me, for my family, my friends, and all who reside here. I do have a slideshow, but I don't see it. Maybe I could click. Oh, there. I'm looking at the wrong one. No slides?
If you don't mind, it's on the wall here. For some reason, we can't get it in the middle, but hopefully you can all see it. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Still don't believe I have it on the wall. So I can continue on. Okay, so as a brief review, it is helpful to recognize legal distinctions between the governing bodies of PAG versus those of the RTA, once again for us and for the public. PAG, as you will recall, operates under a state delegated authority as a metropolitan planning organization and must comply with federal transportation planning requirements. The RTA, on the other hand, is a distinct and independent governing body operating under state law as a political subdivision of the state. Hence, the RTA Board and PAG Regional Council are different legal bodies subject to different rules regarding voting and board governance. The RTA, as you know, is an independent taxing authority established by the Arizona State Legislature to manage a 20-year regional transportation plan and budget approved by the voters to fund it. Without the RTA, the PAG region would have foregone around $2 billion in flexible and supplemental regional funding over a period of 20 years. Flexible funding not beholden to sometimes tricky federal and state requirements. As we look to the future, it is important to note that the Rta Governance Model is, in a lot of ways, the most direct form of representative government. Regardless of jurisdictional boundaries, Pima County voters will directly determine the fate of the next RTA plan and the tax revenues accompanying it, as they did back in 2006. It is imperative to note that the voters represent themselves. The RTA Board is not structured to represent any segment of the population. All members of the RTA Board are obligated to perform their duties representing everyone throughout the region. Going to the PAG side of the house, it was about 50 years ago that PAG was designated as an MPO by the governor at the time and operates under a state contract via the Arizona Department of Transportation. The key function of PAG was to form a regional governing body to encourage regional collaboration and regionally beneficial outcomes by focusing on sharing of pooled resources. Keep a track how many times I might say regional in this presentation. We'll see who wins. When forming this regional governing body, it was determined that each jurisdiction would have one vote, regardless of the size of the unit of government. For example, back in the 70s when PAG was formed, the city of South Tucson had less than 2% of the region's population, yet had equal say alongside the city of Tucson and Pima County, the original 3 members of PAG. As an organization that is state designated to address regional needs, all residents of Pima County are considered PAG's constituents as a subsection of the state's overall constituents. So PAG, as an MPO, conducts its business based on federal and state regulatory requirements. PAG represents this region at all state and federal levels. Since PAG is under contract with the state, any proposed change in the regional council composition or governance is subject to review and approval by the governor prior to regional council actions on any such proposal. Maybe this is in federal code. On the RTA side of things, the RTA statutory language to have the regional council members serve on the RTA board was intended to include other units of local government, such as the Tohono O'odham Nation, the Pasquayaqui tribe, and the state, represented by the governor's Pima County appointee to the State Transportation Board, in addition to the existing units of government, such as Pima County and all the cities and towns we now know. Each RTA board member has one vote to represent the respective unit of government. Statutory language was not intended to allow expanded voting rights by increasing the number of members from the same jurisdiction. This intent was documented by the Regional Council's 2004 motion making the request for the RTA legislative amendment. And in part, that motion read to, one, provide that the membership of the RTA board be identical to the membership of the PAG Regional Council, so as to include representatives of the Tohono O'odham Nation and the Pasquayaqui Tribe and the Arizona State Transportation Board, in addition to deleting the veto provision for Pima County and the city of Tucson. So then, any desire to change the RTA membership or voting structure would likely require the RTA board to seek legislative approval. However, any attempt to deviate from the 2004 legislative intent described earlier without legislative approval may invite a legal challenge. Although I might have some initials after my name, I don't have one as impressive or to some maybe as infamous as JD. Regardless, previous case law and action by the legislature, as described in a legal opinion from someone who is an attorney, show that this potential of legislative risk is a possibility. For this reason, the safest way to go about changing the structure of the RTA board would be through a legislative change to RTA enabling legislation. So when we put together this report for governance structures, you're going to find that there are generally 3 different options for governance among MPOs. The most common appears to be equal voting. Oh, we have slides. Excellent. So the most common is going to be equal voting overall. Weighted voting, which can come in many forms as there are sands in the sea, is another option where some members are given more voting representation than others. Lastly, an MPO board can increase the number of members representing a single jurisdiction. Most ways of structuring the governance of an MPO board come to some combination of these methods. So let's summarize and compare some of the proposals we have seen thus this year. So first, we have Supervisor Scott's proposal. Supervisor Scott proposes created weighted voting on the PAG Regional Council, but not the RTA board, so that in this way, the RTA board can avoid seeking legislative changes to RTA enabling legislation through the Arizona State Legislature. And in this proposal, there are going to be 14 votes, of which Tucson receives 4, Pima County will receive 3, and all other members 1 vote. So there are a few voting implications to be aware of under this proposal. And this would be for the regional council only, not RTA board, correct? First, the city of Tucson and Pima County, plus 1 smaller jurisdiction would constitute a quorum and would have majority rule, should they vote together. Also, because a motion would require greater than 50% of the vote to pass, the city of Tucson and Pima County, constituting exactly 50% of the vote, could together block any motion. If 1 smaller jurisdiction should be absent from the meeting, the city of Tucson and Pima County alone could pass or defeat any motion if they do so together. So for each proposal, we have provided some comparative considerations. So to conclude with Supervisor Scott's proposal, we'll just point out a couple more things to sum up. So first, this proposal compared to other does not make any changes to RTA board, but the governor's approval is required, which may or may not be guaranteed. Additionally, it avoids adding new members to the regional council, which then avoids the question of who to add. This proposal advocates for proportional representation through the RTA, Citizens Advisory Committee, and it's possible that the proposed weighted voting on the PAG Regional Council may give less representation to smaller jurisdictions. Moving on now to Mayor Romero's proposal, the mayor proposes increasing the membership on the PAG Regional Council. By including new members on the Regional Council, the RTA board members are also increased given the language of the RTA enabling legislation. In this proposal, City of Tucson would have 8 members total, Pima County would have 5 members, and all other jurisdictions would have 1, making a total of 20. As for voting implications, this proposal, unlike Supervisor Scott's proposal, would affect both the PAG Regional Council and the RTA Board. With 13 out of 20 votes, the City of Tucson and Pima County together under these numbers would constitute a quorum. While no single jurisdiction would have veto power, the City of Tucson and Pima County could unilaterally vote for or against any provision if they vote in unison. Because this proposal is going to increase board membership and not weight a vote, one should be mindful of quorum issues if seating other city council members or members of the Pima County Board of Supervisors for the respective body. Additionally, the governor's approval is of course required to alter the PAG Regional Council, but because of the changes of the regional council membership also result in changes on the RTA Board, one should be mindful of potential legislative interest if the change is not sought through amending the RTA enabling legislation. So to sum up, Mayor Romero's proposal is true and provides increased representation, more closely tied to population proportion than any other proposal. However, despite no single member having complete veto power, the two largest members would constitute a quorum and together could veto any action. Not only is the governor's approval required, but also approval from the Arizona State Legislature as described. And because two jurisdictions could have majority rule, smaller jurisdictions may have less of a voice compared to equal consensus-driven structure used currently. There's also, in a previous meeting, it was suggested that a representative of Suntran could be added to the PAG Regional Council and consequently the RTA Board. Federal regulations confirm the interest of public transportation can be achieved through current elected officials who provide public transportation instead of private contractors. Because Suntran is a contractor of the City of Tucson, a conflict of interest may be created should an employee of Suntran be included on the regional council. And other MPOs that do have a public transit representative, these operators are public entities independent of any jurisdictional body. We also have General Maxwell's proposal, who advocates adding additional members to the RTA committees. In this way, neither the governor nor the legislator's approval is required, as the underlying regional council and RTA board membership and governance does not change. As for committee changes, this proposal supports the provision by Supervisor Scott for the desired CAC membership. Additionally, this proposal would add one member from the City of Tucson to the RTA's Technical Management Committee. Thus, this would increase City of Tucson's membership on the TMC from 2 members to 3 members. Pima County would retain 2 members, and all other jurisdictions would have 1 member, in addition to 8 citizen members. Other policy considerations regarding RTA Next under this proposal would need to be reviewed and considered by the RTA board on a case-by-case basis. So if you recall from September, which I know is a long time ago, we had a bit of a discussion on so-called MAG model from our friends up north in the Maricopa Association of Governments. Now, they primarily are using equal voting, but allow for a form of weighted voting, which effectively functions as a veto vote. In this system, equal voting is called numerical voting, and it still has primacy. And the numerical majority of votes is required to pass any motion. Following a successful numerical vote, MAG member jurisdictions have the option of requesting a weighted vote. Thus, weighted voting can never be used alone to pass a motion. After a motion has passed with an equal vote majority, it could still fail under a weighted voting majority. Hence, the weighted vote is essentially a blocking mechanism or a veto vote. One interesting element of this model is that it retains equal voting and gives it the upper hand. One should remember too that the MAG region is quite different than the PAG region. Whereas we have 9 voting members, they have excess of 34. So in the MAG region, numerous coalitions can be formed to take advantage of the veto power granted by the weighted vote. There are no obvious winners or losers between big guys and small guys. In the PAG region, it may not work as well to base weight purely off of population proportion as in the MAG region, where the City of Tucson could veto any provision it chooses to. So this model also does not escape the need for the governor's approval via redesignation of PAG as an MPO. Also, there may be legislative scrutiny should this method be pursued on the RTA board as well. Retaining the current voting rights of members and not changing the governance of the Regional Council and RTA board is also an option. In fact, this has been the norm for 50 years of PAG's history in the last 15 years of the RTA. Historically, there has been unanimous support of equal representation with equal voting rights and privileges among all members, including in 2011 when the PAG Regional Council unanimously opposed a legislative bill creating weighted voting on the RTA board. And as recently as 2017, both the RTA board and the PAG Regional Council approved a resolution, which happens to be on the wall, stating that individual member jurisdictions must work together as equal partners for the region to reach consensus. Looking across the United States, equal voting does appear to be the most common governance structure among MPOs. Additionally, a recent RTA performance audit lauded equal voting as a best practice. Because the RTA board is not structured to represent a segment of the population, but all residents of Pima County, voters retain the ultimate say at the ballot. Also, since equal voting requires consensus, it invites other creative and collaborative ways to address the needs of each member jurisdiction in a way that best earns the support of all partner jurisdictions. Procedurally, this option is going to be much simpler as it does not require the governor's approval or legislative change to the underlying RTA enabling legislation. Importantly, it provides equal say for every member jurisdiction, including traditionally underrepresented communities found in some of our member jurisdictions. Might be helpful to summarize some of these proposals in terms of regulatory hoops to jump. Now, I can barely make a table in Microsoft products without wanting to rip my hair out, let alone one that looks like a stoplight. This is the kind of scheme we're going for: green, red, yellow stoplight. We're an MPO. But, you know, squint your eyes and pretend. So green implies go, and it's going to symbolize the easiest path forward from a regulatory standpoint. Yellow is going to advise some caution. We need the governor's approval for yellow. And red is going to indicate probably the most difficult, because not only we need the governor's approval, but also legislature's approval. With that, that concludes my presentation, unless you have any other questions or anything else.
Thank you. I suspect you'll be available for questions as the discussion.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Mayor Honey.
Mr. Chairman, I think I still had the floor. I said I would stop if you wanted to do the presentation. I want to bring up some things that have been brought to my attention on this Supervisor Scott's motion. Some folks of my friends of mine watch the Tucson City Council meetings. I do not. I don't rewatch mine either, but they did. And there were comments made at the last Tucson City Council meeting that there were already 5 votes here to do the weighted voting. They specifically mentioned the tribe, the nation, South Tucson, Pima County, and the city were on board to do that. Go back and listen to the Tucson City Council meeting. I think that's illegal right there. If you're talking to the majority of the board trying to get a vote and you've already gotten committed to do that. And what the presentation said was kind of what I was trying to say. To change the MPO voting, PAG, you got to go through the governor's office, and to change the RTA taxing authority voting, you would have to go through the legislature. Even if we pass this, I don't think it's legal without those approvals. So I think we're getting in the weeds here, and I love PAG and the RTA. I'm a big fan, and I think it's worked really well. But if we start doing this stuff, I'm not going to sit on my hands, I can tell you. I'll be on the phone before I get home from the meeting. And, you know, I just really think that this is inappropriate. I'll yield the floor for whoever.
Mayor Tesso, could I ask you to restate the motion just so we're clear on what the motion is?
Sure. I move that we adopt Supervisor Scott's voting structure via the PAG Regional Council, providing 4 votes for the city of Tucson, 3 votes for Pima County, and 1 vote each for the remaining jurisdictions.
Just for clarification, it's not changing the RTA voting structure, just the PAG voting structure. Is that? I think it was mentioned that it was changing both, and I just didn't hear that. Okay. Open it up for discussion. So supervisors, okay, yeah. How about?
Mr. Chair, I'll take it only.
Ron Maxwell, Supervisor
I
Scott.
know Supervisor Scott will allow me to, only because obviously the proposal that I made just came out yesterday. And it was presented today in fairly well, but there was more to the proposal that I sent to Jackie to forward to the members. And I want to kind of just lay a little bit of groundwork. I think the other proposals that we've got on the table, we've talked about it pretty much nauseam. So I'd like just a moment of all your time to explain why. One, I truly believe changing our voting structure is fraught with danger and challenges for many of the reasons we've already heard. When we started talking about the changes in the voting structure, the first thing that came up was the MAG model. That was the initial desire of the city, was to incorporate a MAG type model of voting. Having talked and with all due respect to Tom and his legal opinion, I have checked with other lawyers to try to find out if any of these would not have to go to the government. And so far, the feedback I've gotten from pretty much everybody is it would have to. The only one that might not have to would be like a MAG voting model, where it's not one that can carry any day. It's only a blocking action that you may be in the federal jurisdiction, but it's even a stretch. So what I tried to do in my proposal is to find out what are the things we have heard, and what is the intent of why are we trying to do this, and why, old military philosophy, why would you do something that's got zero likelihood of actually becoming the case? Because I do believe that if it had to go to the state, either the legislature or the governor. So I've gone back and I have Mayor Honey watched through the study sessions and the city of Tucson's, and what I've heard is a lot of concern about fair share. And I think even they've now shifted off that because they realize there is the fair share fiscally when you look at it. It really comes down to their voice. Do they have say in the current process as well as the development of RTA next? And that is why the first step on my proposal was to accept Supervisor Scott's proposal for the Citizens Advisory. Because when we talk RTA next, it's not us that's going to build the plan. It's the Citizens Advisory Committee that's going to build the plan and have all the input. With that proposal and what we're voting on later today at the RTA, it will either be 16 or 18 members of the city of Tucson. And we're talking city of Tucson residents. I'm an Oro Valley resident. That's where I live. I work in the city of Tucson. I play in the city of Tucson. Play in Oro Valley too, but I really, that's where the golf course is, right, Mayor? That's where I play. That's where I support. But the fact of the matter is, if you look at all the members, we're going to put 16 or 18 from the city of Tucson on, and I'm betting you half those others work or play in the city of Tucson as well. So I think we all value the importance of the city. So that was my first recommendation. The second one, which is also directly impactful for the development of RTA next, would be the addition of another member to the TMC, where you have all the experts, the transportation experts. It's chaired by the city manager. It's chaired by the county administrator, and you've got all the experts on that. Again, is it 52% of that committee? No. But is it an increased weighted vote and representation on that committee? Absolutely. Now the things, and I couldn't believe it, all the papers I've got, I did not print out my own suggestion, but there was more to it that I put on that thing that I wanted to consider. Somebody's got one. I might not have to put my readers on. Thank you. Appreciate all the support. But with regards to the remaining projects, we've heard a lot about the remaining projects, and Mayor Honey, you're correct. The city actually did recommend they come late, but that doesn't mean we are not responsible for making sure they happen and they get done. And I do believe the city of Tucson deserves to know what that plan is. And that plan, so what I wrote in there with other agreements as part of my proposal is with regards to the remaining projects, we identify the proposed plan and funding to complete the projects as part of the original RTA. And we define the specifics to outline how original RTA projects are addressed if they're moved into RTA next. We've said they'll never become RTA next projects. They may be in the RTA next package that goes to the voters, but they are still identified as original RTA projects. And when we talk about the weighting of how much fair share and what the projects went, we've got to remember those are not RTA Next projects. They don't go into those calculations. I think we can define that. We also, having read the entire state statute, the entire federal statute that's cited by in the opinions, as well as the bylaws of PAG, the CART, the rest of them, it came to my attention that the CART, the Citizens Accountability for Regional Transportation Committee, which is responsible for working with the TMC to ensure that the current RTA goes through as voted by the voters. And if there's changes in propositions brought forward to us, they work with the CART to go through. That's only good for the 2006 RTA. So we as a board are going to have to either reauthorize it, set it forward. And when we do that, I believe it's important that we consider some of the concerns that we're hearing about the amount of voice in those committees. And for that, one of the things I put down is we need to determine that composition prior to the vote for the next RTA. And we need to consider increasing the jurisdictional appointments to the CART. I had 2 for the city of Tucson, 1 for the county, and I believe it or not, I'd even be willing to listen to 1 for Marana because of the perspectives. But we need to address that, and you need more of the voices. That's, to me, what I heard from the mayor and council was they didn't feel their voices were being heard. I don't think it's about the votes. We've talked about 99% of PAG votes have been unanimous, 95% of RTA. And that doesn't mean I'm downplaying the fact that there is some validity to the idea of weighted voting or some other change in the PAG. But now, in my opinion, is not the time. It's fraught with danger. We don't have the 100% legal consideration of what might be possible to do as Pima County. And to me, the RTA is a Pima County initiative. I don't want to turn to the folks in Maricopa to solve our problems or to make an effort. I think we can do it here. And the last thing, I think this is a very important piece of what I've heard from the mayor and council during your meetings. Is the last thing on my one was asking agreement that we as a board would provide direction to the Citizen Advisory Committee to include in the RTA Next plan a system for periodic review of remaining projects for current feasibility and need. And the reason I think that's significant is 20 years is a long time to predict. Technology has changed a lot in the last 20 years. It's going to change a lot more in the next 20. And we need to have a process that will allow us, and it will reduce the rigidity of the plans, which has been one of the complaints that we've heard. We planned something 20 years ago and now and provides flexibility for changing technology and transportation. So that is the essence of what my proposal was. There are some other things that I think will come up during our RTA discussion that I've heard from the mayor and council's words, but I think as a region, we would be making a mistake to rush into this. Again, I'm not opposed to the consideration of the MAG model, but now's not the time. We've got to solve this RTA issue. We've got to see the cities move forward with their local issues. You know, a lot of times the city's been criticized for not taking care of their own infrastructure. And now I'm hearing people criticize the idea that they want to take care of their own infrastructure. The city has some very specific needs for their infrastructure that are not regional of nature. I think they have the right to figure out how they want to proceed forward with that. Will it impact the RTA? Possibly, but I think again, that depends. We don't know yet. They don't have a plan on the table for the amount or the structure or what they're going to fund. But all infrastructure in the region, all infrastructure in the infrastructure of Marana, I'll make sure I point. Sorry, Mayor Joe.
I know.
You're my mayor. I know it. The infrastructure of Oro Valley, Sarita, on the unincorporated portions of Pima County, Marana, and inside the city of Tucson, that all impacts our economic development and our quality of life by its structure. And as the city manager pointed out at the last study session, I believe 85% of those roads inside of the city of Tucson are now rated poor, fair or poor. So I think it's the proper thing for each municipality to take care of their roads and do what they have to do to repair them. But at the same time, for the regional flow, the roads that really make the city of Tucson, honestly, where the majority of our members from all of the folks we represent work and play, we have to keep this RTA together. And while this doesn't address the voting issues, it does address the voice that the city has. And I would hope that the mayor and council, if we were past that proposal, would recognize that and stay on board with the RTA. I will not ask for the floor again.
Well, I wouldn't say that, General Maxwell, but thank you. Other comments? Supervisor Scott, yeah, my apologies, Supervisor.
Not at all. Mr. Chair, when I made my proposal back in the fall, it was with the goal, the overarching goal of moving the RTA Next plan forward because we had been at a standstill. And the aligned goal was for all of us to move forward together. And the public has those expectations for us as well. They don't want to see us peel off in separate directions. That's not the way to sustain their confidence. That's definitely not the way to build a winning strategy to pass an RTA Next. I would argue that divisiveness is also not the proper recipe for any of the jurisdictions at this table to pass any measure that they may be considering putting on the ballot. We have to move forward together. And so I find myself very much in agreement with my friend General Maxwell that this is not the time to approve a proposal that I put forth in the fall. Adding votes to the regional council and leaving the RTA board alone seemed like a good compromise to me. It may still be. I hope we continue to consider it, but we're not sending the right messages to our constituents if we try to push it through today in what will surely be a divided vote. I'm going to take this off for a second. There's certainly, and I'm also very concerned with the message that a divided vote will send to the governor, who does have to approve any change to our voting structures. There certainly are other bases for compromise, some of which General Maxwell alluded to in his proposal, and I hope we talk about those today. But I am not prepared to vote for this proposal today and to send it forth into our community and up to the Capitol with a divided vote. It's sending the wrong message to the public. It's sending the wrong message to the person who would have to approve this proposal. So Mayor Tesso, although I appreciate you moving forth a proposal that I made back in the fall, I'm not going to vote for it today.
Other discussion? Mayor Romero?
Thank you so much, colleagues. Since I first requested this conversation to be agendized almost 1 year ago, last February, we have heard about the merits of different governance structures on both PAG and RTA. I have appreciated hearing from each and every one of you, and your perspectives are very important to me and my colleagues on the council. As you know, because some of you heard the meeting on Tuesday, my colleagues sent me with a clear directive. And a couple of things. We need a firm commitment that we will develop a plan to address the funding gaps, which I believe General Maxwell's proposal at least defines a way to get us there, which is a good thing, in a voting structure that gives the city of Tucson the voice that our residents deserve. And I think General Maxwell has hit the nail on the head when it comes to how the city of Tucson has felt the last, I would say, 4 years. This is not a phenomenon that started recently. It really, there has been questions from my colleagues on the council for 4 years now, since 2017. Questions started about the concerns that we had about how we were going to deliver the projects to the voters of our region. And for 4 years, the city of Tucson has not been heard. And issues have been compiling, and the voice of the citizens of Tucson has been diminished. And one of the reasons that it has been diminished is because a population of 560,000 people has one vote of 9. That's 22% when we're actually 52% of the population. And so the status quo has not been working. And it is easy to undermine or ignore such big population center, where, by the way, we almost provide 70% of the sales tax generated that provides for the infrastructure that we all enjoy. And so as you saw in the presentation, my proposal is very, very different. The one we put at the table, which is closer, by the way, to the population that needs to be represented with our vote. In the spirit of compromise, I believe that Supervisor Scott's proposal is the city of Tucson moving towards the center. It has a much less population representation, but I feel that in order for the city of Tucson to, because I mean, I'm pretty sure you've heard all my colleagues on the council, as well as I have said here repeatedly, I want to make sure that we are a good regional partner. And I've said it before, and this is the reason why, really, to be honest, I've been very frustrated for the last year and a half, but I keep coming to this table so that we can come up with a solution that's best, not just for the city of Tucson, but that's a win for everyone in this region. When one jurisdiction is not being heard and their voice is not being listened to, then there's a problem. And I want to make sure that you understand that I've moved from when we first started, like the MAG model, and then we looked at the model that I presented with 8 votes for the city of Tucson. We have moved in the spirit of compromise to the middle. And while my preference would be for a voting structure that is more representative of population, I am willing to accept Supervisor Scott's proposal, which I think Supervisor Scott for bringing it to the table and saying, okay, let's put something that we can discuss and that balances the concerns of equitable representation for the city of Tucson, while at the same time not providing for a veto power and not having to go to a state legislature. I guess what I'd like to say is that it takes courage and leadership to set aside our differences and build consensus. I feel very strongly, and my colleagues on the council feel very strongly, that us moving towards the center with Supervisor Scott's proposal is taking a step towards the middle. And to be honest with you, I think that letting this regional council work on this and making the decisions that we have to make today and into the future, hopefully I agree with you, General, that we're not going to resolve everything today, but we are going to continue working towards language, etc. I really feel it is important to be able to take a vote on this today and continue moving forward with other suggestions like the one that you brought to the table, General Maxwell. But I think that in order for me to go back to my colleagues on the council and say, hey, there's movement there, they are hearing us, we need to take action. And I would say, General Maxwell, that I would love for you to put your proposal as a possibility for us to vote today. Because if we do have this forward movement, especially with your suggestion, I think that I could go back to my council and say, hey, there's movement, there's positive movement forward, and there's willingness there to compromise.
Mayor Murphy?
Well, I think it is a proposal for potential for the RTA perspective on that. My concern would be because I agree with Supervisor Scott and General Maxwell. And knowing the city has $13+ billion worth of needs, I've always, as an outside observer, thought, you're going to need, and I commend you for trying to get federal money. But we also have individual needs. So I think it will take a vote for local needs that you're considering as a city and a council, just like all of our municipalities do, whether it's a fire station or potential parks. We have to have that ability. But as I stated earlier, each of us represent the million people within our region. And I think that's been the difficulty, that sometimes we come to this table only representing our individual municipalities, and the regional needs, benefit all of us. I certainly won't be supporting the motion that's on the floor, but would be willing to consider General Maxwell, because really I try to look at the end game. The end game is we want a RTA next to pass. I think that's been our goal. And if we start with divided votes on this or any other issue, I believe it not only makes RTA next more difficult to get passed, which I'd be sad about, but I'd also be sad if the city couldn't get their local needs a vote passed, because I think it's going to take the full gamut to meet those needs. So I'm certainly willing. I guess my only concern would be is making those compromise, General Maxwell, which I'm certainly willing to do, and then find out later, because we have 5 years left of this. We haven't even put the CAC together, but then to find out next week or the week after, the city is deciding not to, so we make all these compromises, which I think benefit the city, and the city pulls out. So I guess that's my only concern, but I know we could bring anything back at any point to revisit it if we need to.
Mayor Honey and then General Maxwell.
I'm not 100% thrilled with General Maxwell's proposal, but I would support it. I will tell you, I will not support the motion that was made by Mayor Tesso. I think that's going the wrong way. I do think what General Ted, it works for you. We've been friends for a long time. Yeah, General Maxwell's proposal slides us more into the middle. I think Mayor Romero was talking a little bit about that, kind of what with the CAC slides us more into the middle, adding a person to the TMC slides us more to the middle. And it doesn't change our overall voting, but it does start it starts wiggling us around a little bit in the middle. And I would just ask everybody, please do not vote for my good friend Bob Tesso's motion, but I would support a motion if General Maxwell makes one with his proposal. Call for the question.
Sorry, General Maxwell.
Since it's now been asked by at least two of the mayors sitting around this table, if I consider making, I didn't come in here planning on making a motion for my own proposal, but I will. I'd like to move that we, as an alternate motion to Mayor Tesso's, that we adopt the proposal as distributed to each and every one of you going forward.
I'll second that.
Okay, seconded by Supervisor Scott. Discussion. I'd just like to say that I appreciate General Maxwell, your clearly thoughtful consideration and your interest, and I think all of our interests. We want to hear all the voices of the million plus or minus residents in Pima County. And I appreciate the fact that you have listened to the Tucson Council
For all I know, you may listen to the Oro Valley Town Council. But I appreciate the fact that you have listened. And what I appreciate is that I think you've really tried to address the concerns and trying to hear what. So I appreciate the Citizen Advisory Council, your focus on that. I can also appreciate the idea of periodically reviewing. 20 years is an incredibly long time. And so I think that's a positive move. I think the remaining projects, I know they're referenced as the City of Tucson projects. I think I said a few meetings ago, but these are all of our projects. They're not City of Tucson projects. They are all of our projects as a council. I have as much interest, I believe, as Mayor Romero has, she may have a tinge more, and ensuring that those projects are funded. But I believe that that's a responsibility that we all share. And we all have an interest in ensuring that there is a funding gap plan, that there is, and it's my understanding that we're making progress in that direction, which I find very encouraging. And the other items that you mentioned, I won't belabor those. I appreciate this because admittedly the discussion about the voting, while I want to be open and I've appreciated the discussion, I think it's been valuable in some ways, maybe helping us to appreciate to a degree, maybe not what we have. And I'd just like to say that PAG is not MAG. If PAG was MAG, there'd be 20 other people seated. I don't know that this room could fit MAG, for one thing. So I really love the intimacy of PAG and our 9 members. I also, when Dr. Adkins gave his presentation, he said this: there is strong representation on the regional council from the Tohono O'odham Nation, the Pasquayaqui tribe, and the city of South Tucson, each of which represents communities traditionally marginalized by transportation decisions. This representation and these partnerships are critical for the region. I'm incredibly proud to sit next to Chairman Ucapicio, to have Chairman Norris, to have Mayor Tesso, a part of this council. I think it speaks volumes to what we value as a region. And I think to do anything that would diminish that is just personally for me is a step in the wrong direction. I think to our credit, and I'm a relatively new member to this council, so I think it's really quite remarkable that there has been the unanimity over a decade. And so that's where I've struggled, is that some of the concerns that have been expressed, I don't think it can be the voting is the source of the problem, or the voting structure. But I think that it's been a valuable discussion. Like some of my fellow mayors, I don't support the original motion. I certainly support General Maxwell. So I just, it was not my intention. Big mistake there.
That's why Ted works.
Yeah, Ted. Yeah, okay. I think Mayor Romero, did you motion?
Yes, I absolutely 100% am supportive of your proposal. And I appreciate the recognition of the frustrations that Tucson has been feeling about the concerns that we've carried forward. I think this is very positive movement for the concerns that we have. I've been saying, I've been, as a mayor and the representative of the city of Tucson, along with my colleagues on the council, have been talking about these concerns and getting answers for our concerns for the last year and a half. And I believe that the proposal put forward by General Maxwell addresses much of what our colleagues on the council have been saying for 4 years. What I would like, though, if the general would accept, is that we continue looking towards the MAG model, at least looking at that model so that we can attach the possibility of me going back to my colleagues on the council and saying we are going to look into the possibility, because we are worried about involving the state legislature, and I absolutely understand why, and I agree. And we want to make sure that if we do any changes to the bylaws, we don't absolutely need the governor's signature. So I would like if you would accept the possibility of continuing to look at that model to add additional voice to the city of Tucson as we move forward.
And Mr. Chair, Mayor Romero, I've got no problem accepting that. There was actually no mention in mind of just stopping any discussion. I did express my personal belief is if there's a model in there, which was the one that the city originally came forward with, was the MAG model. And if for the purpose of showing support, you want to tag that we continue the exploration. But my big issue was now's not the time to do this. If the situation's not good, we're going to be in trouble. We really need to work forward on the regional side. And along with it, really, this is your acknowledgement of looking at the ag portion forward. That means we've kind of set the RTA aside. And that really is important because the RTA is the one that would trigger the legislation. The RTA is, it's a separate entity here from ag, so it's different, but we do, sometimes there are blurred lines between the two entities.
But if you
So
can attach that language.
I can
continue
attach that we
exploring.
continue to explore the legal and ramifications as well as the ramifications to the organization as a whole of the
Right.
MAG. I'm okay with making that. Okay.
Supervisor Scott,
Yes.
everybody clear? Any discussion? Chairman Yucapicio?
I'm actually glad we're here today. I don't know, we have to order dinner a little later like we did one time over here. It's amazing how Mayor Honey, you brought up the tribes and the nations and all that. But you're right. We do discuss things. I'm not going to tell you we don't. We do. I live in the city of Tucson, to be honest with you. I grew up, I was born here. So it does matter what the city gets or doesn't get. It matters what Oro Valley gets. I used to work and chop down all kinds of mesquites over there when I was little, and because we needed the firewood. But it's changed. Marana has changed.
I
Marana
was
from a
born in
small
the city
little
of
town like
Tucson as well.
Sahuarita, I picked all kinds of cotton over there in Sahuarita in my lifetime. And I wonder when, Lord, are we going to be at the level of some of the other jurisdictions as a tribe, as a Native American, as a campesino? You start thinking about today how great it could be if we're not all going to get everything we want. You look at us, everybody said, well, the reservation is way out there. It could go the same thing. But actually 2/3 of us live here. All of us live in the major city. And when it comes down to, broken sidewalks, lights that don't work, pedestrian ways that, people get run over all the time because was he inside the lanes or not? The lighting, it's very dark. We just lost somebody on Broadway. Some of those folks that came from another country. That little boy, I start thinking about that. And I feel responsible because did we do our job as members of this committee to ensure that there's safe lighting for all the roads and everything that people and traffic and everything? Yes, I think the motion was there, but I'm not 100% clear is that because he took his off. And then both of you first and second. And then he brought his amendment. If somebody could read exactly what we're gonna vote on.
I was gonna do that. I was gonna ask the same question.
Because I know how it gets with us here. But thank you, I'm glad that, you guys are strong. We're all strong. We continue to be strong and stronger together. General Maxwell, let's go to war. And that's the way I see you all the time. But if this is how it is in this little war room, then that's what we were chosen to be here and put our strong side and sometimes our compassionate side, our caring side, and all those things that we bring here. Not only that, but look at these folks on this side. Everything that we do and how we do it, it's them, somebody could say it's your job. It's not your job. You have to have a little bit of all the things I mentioned to be able to kind of get what we're all trying to put as a team here, so they can implement things like that. And there's no perfection. COVID has changed everything. Everything has changed. It doesn't matter if it's hospitals, education, colleges, now how many police are off duty right now because of COVID? Our kids are suffering, our elders are suffering. I ask all you guys, be considerate, all of us. We support every single jurisdiction here. We'll continue doing that because we do care. I asked, like I said the other day, our tribal preservation specialist, the doctor, I'm not a doctor, PhD and everything else. How far can you trace us in the Santa Cruz River Basin? His answer to our council, 800 BC, along with the Otam and other tribes. But we do care. And Ned, brother and partner in this region and your elders, they inspire us. You inspire us. Today, it was all inspiration to me, like, okay, what do we need to do next? And if that's what it is, this voting thing that we're gonna do today, then we get to that point and we work on it and we keep working on it. And nothing's perfect, but hopefully the city and other jurisdictions will be happy with some of the things that we're trying to do. And we're never gonna be perfect because none of us are. None of us are. For some reason, the Lord put us here with all kinds of faults, strengths, weaknesses, and everything else. And now all kinds of experts judge us on. But thank you for being here and thank you for taking this challenge on. I myself, I guess a little later, I'm gonna be the RTA chair. You are. And I'm gonna get beat up all over the place. But I was used to that in a family of 12.
Good luck.
But thank you guys. And other than that, if you could clarify what
Sure.
exactly happened between, an hour ago or half an hour ago and now?
Mr. Chair, I see Chairman Norris' hand up.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Chairman Norris?
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I do appreciate the opportunity to be involved in this regional council. Although, we're all pretty busy, and although I would have loved to have been much more active than I have been in recent months, maybe years. But the fact is, we just like everybody else, we pay our dues. We pay our participation in this regional council. And I truly appreciate Chairman Yocopicio's comments, in that the city of Tucson, the situation with the roads and everything, and city of Tucson will leave the reservation in order to go to the city of Tucson, go to the county and other jurisdictions to get the needs that they have for their families, for their communities, whatever the case may be. And so not only are the roads and the traffic and the situations we are concerned about here on the reservation, but we also have to be equally concerned about those same situations within the city of Tucson, within the county, and within your other jurisdictions as well, the jurisdictions that you all represent.
And this is not an easy decision. This has been very enlightening to me, to sit here and to listen to the conversation and to listen to the willingness of people to bring proposals to the table that, by all intention and purposes, make a lot of sense to me. Makes a lot of sense to me. And you know, I grew up in the city of Tucson. You know, the way I'll describe it this way, I ran in the streets of the city of Tucson, and I grew up there. You know, I currently live at the Santa Vera Reservation, but for much of my young life, you know, I lived in the city of Tucson. I was an urban autumn, and there is a considerable amount of urban natives that live and reside in the city of Tucson that I'm sure are as equally concerned about the city of the road conditions, the traffic issues that are going on within the city of Tucson. And we have to be concerned about the fatalities. We have to be concerned about how we drive, you know, what's distracting us from paying attention to where we're driving and how we're driving and who's walking, you know, on the streets or riding their bikes on the streets or whatever. We all have to be concerned about that. And, you know, I just want to say, and I appreciate the chair of the RTA's comments about being proud that, you know, that the tribal nations and the city of South Tucson are on this on the PAG. But there's more to it than just simply being on the PAG. There's more to it that I think that we all need to understand about each other's jurisdictions, how we are able and unable to provide the necessities that we need in order to address some of the concerns that we have. You know, the majority of the roads here on the reservation are Indian reservation roads, federal routes. The Department of Interior has the responsibility, has the trust responsibility to address the roads conditions on our tribal reservations. The federal government has neglected that trust responsibility for years and years and years and years. Roads has never been a priority on tribal nations, not only my nation, but I'm sure the Pasco Yaqui and other tribal nations in the Arizona, city of Arizona, as well as nationally. Roads have never been a priority, but our roads are our liability. For many of us, we can't get to some of our communities because the road conditions are so bad that many of our communities are locked out of the outside world or outside of the beginning out of their village because their road is blocked by flooding or whatever the case may be. We can't get to our elders who are needing us when we have flood situations going on. So we are in dire straits with our road conditions, and we don't see any hope in our trustee or our trustor, the federal government, in being able to address the roads conditions on our tribal communities. That's one of the reasons why we look at organizations like PAG, like the RTA, and see how we might be able to work together to try and help each other in resolving those conditions that you know, that we all are trying to address. So, you know, thank you for listening. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you to my brother in tribal leadership, Chairman Yucupicio, for your comments. I wholeheartedly agree with you. And thank you to the general for your offer, for your proposal. I appreciate that. But the dialogue cannot stop here. Whatever we end up doing, we have to continue to listen to each other, be willing to listen to each other, be willing to help each other accomplish the things that are not only good for us, but the good for your communities as well. And that's the only way we're going to accomplish that, is if we keep an open mind and open heart about where we're going to go and how we're going to get there. We can't pit each other against each other. That's not going to get us anywhere. So, fellow leaders on the regional council, thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Norris. Mayor Romero, and then General Maxwell, if you could repeat your motion.
Absolutely.
After the mayor, Mayor Romero.
When I first started coming to these meetings, I stayed quiet for about 2 months, and then doing all of the research that I had to do as mayor representative of the city of Tucson, I started speaking up. And I'm pretty sure you all remember, I've been saying over and over and over again that the status quo is unacceptable. And I appreciate you all listening. I hope you understand that where we are and where we started for the city of Tucson, we have taken huge steps towards all of you. Some unfortunately didn't want to take a baby step towards the middle. But I think that with this proposal and the promise of continuing to work towards equal representation will get us to a point where we can fix all the knots and continue moving forward as a region. Because I've always said, and I will say it again, this organization, both PAG and the RTA, are not just important for the city of Tucson, they're important for Marana, Oro Valley, South Tucson, our Native nations. And I just want to make sure that I reiterate my support for the motion on the floor with the added language, and that the city of Tucson has taken and will continue to take steps forward. But again, the status quo is unacceptable, and we need to continue finding solutions for the issues that worry us. And those issues have always been the same. Lack of representational voices in the room, and answers as to how we're going to deliver the program that we promised the voters we would in a timely fashion. I think we've taken incredible steps today, and I'm really happy that we've been able to move from this impasse, and with the promise of actually getting to work on real issues that we have to focus on for the benefit of all of us. So thank you, all of you, for having the hard conversations. And by the way, we are going to continue having hard and difficult discussions as we continue to find a way to do the right thing, in a way to make investments in our community for the benefit of the people of our region. So I wanted to say that I don't think it's over. I think we're just continuing the discussion to make it better and better and more fair and equitable for the residents of the city of Tucson.
General, if you could repeat your motion, please.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to eliminate the fluff from what I sent out yesterday, and we'll just be straight to what the motion is. The motion's to adopt the structural changes as proposed by Supervisor Scott to the Citizens Advisory Committee. To change the Technical Management Committee by adding 1 member from the city of Tucson to the TMC. Other agreements of this proposal is to identify for the remaining projects, not just the city of Tucson, but the remaining projects, of the original RTA, to work towards an official board position for identifying the proposed plan and funding to complete the projects as part of the original RTA, and to define the specifics to outline how original RTA projects are addressed if they are moved into RTA next. To determine the composition of the Citizens Accountability for Regional Transportation, or CART committee, prior to approval of the next RTA or the RTA next plan, with consideration to increasing the number of jurisdictional appointments to the CART committee by 2 for the city of Tucson and 1 for the county. And that's the consideration. So we could add Marana or some other changes as well, but as minimum consideration for those. Provide direction to the Citizen Advisory Committee to include in RTA Next a plan or system for periodic review of remaining projects for current feasibility and need, and continue exploration on a MAG-weighted voting structure as applicable to the Pima Association of Governments.
And Supervisor Scott?
Yes, sir.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nay. Motion passes. Thank you. So before we adjourn, I just want to let you know that out of 5 actions, there's been unanimous vote under this chairmanship. Meeting adjourned.
needed you there, Joe.
Meeting adjourned. I vote we take a bathroom break.
Yeah, could we have 5 minutes or something? My head's swimming.
At least it's not.
Tucson was the only one that ever. So we're not that far behind. So they work hard every day.
Thank you.
Thomas,
We'll give Ted a break since he saved all of us.
All right, Mr. Chair, whenever you're ready.
I just was waiting for somebody to say, why is the military?
Oh,
guy
I'm
the
sorry.
guy
Yes,
that's
Mr.
late?"
Chair, we can start.
Okay, really?
Ready?
Yep.
Okay.
I'll call this meeting to order. Going on to agenda item number 2 is the election of officers. And who we have for the chair is Chairman Peter Uguficio. Vice Chair is Mayor Ed Hooney, and second Vice Chair is General Ted Maxwell.
So moved. Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Okay, Mr.
First and foremost, damos gracias a Dios. We thank our Father in heaven that has given our chair, our both best chairs, good and healthy year in spite of everything that's in front of us as humans. But serving here on the board has been an honor on our behalf, having you here and having both of you here. Mayor Teso, we are families that actually have known each other for a long time, and watching you work here and all has truly, truly been a blessing and an honor. So thank you for your service here. Thank you. I will accept all the tomatoes after that.
Okay. Files here.
I got your eyes open. Thank you.
Look, anything you want to say other than good luck?
So, Mr. Chair, again, I may, if I may, on behalf of staff, really want to acknowledge and thank Mayor Teso, especially since this year we had not only our annual audit, we had our 15-year audit under Rta as well, and he was very much involved and engaged. I just want to express our appreciation and thanks.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? There are none. We'll move on to item number 3, call of the audience. David?
Mr. Chair, as a member of the RTA board, we currently have no speakers lined up for call to the audience.
Move on to action item number 4.
Yes, Mr. Chair, if you may, we would like to request for approval of the minutes of the December meeting.
So moved. Second?
I had a comment, just in reviewing the minutes, there were several references to, for example, if the RTA board wants to discuss how the minutes are presented, then it needs to be on a future agenda. Mayor Teso agreed, Mr. Maxwell agreed that this should be discussed at the next meeting. There's a few references like that of items being suggested for the next meeting, but then looking at the agenda, they're not on the agenda. So the question in my mind is, how does something get put on the agenda?
Yeah, so if I may, Mr. Chair, Mayor Winfield, actually, if you like to discuss that, it's agendized. And if you look at the staff memo, it's agendized as a topic for discussion. I've had an opportunity to discuss that with Mayor Teso as well. What we did was, in addition to the minutes itself, we added time marks, timestamps to the audio and the video of the minutes. So this way it's a little bit easier for anyone that wants to actually click on the link and go directly to the item. You can do that. We went out and we actually got some estimates on the cost of doing a verbatim, and the cost of doing verbatim for meeting is roughly about $2,000 per meeting. But we would need a contractor to do that for us. And I believe, based on my conversations with Mayor Teso, he agreed, and also Mayor Murphy at the time, they both agreed that that may not be something that we want to pursue, but obviously that's at pleasure of the board. If you like to do that, this is the opportunity to have that conversation. And again, it's agendized that you could act on that if you would like to.
I don't necessarily have any, I just, again, reviewing the minutes. I didn't see it on the agenda, but you're saying it is on the agenda?
It's in the memo attached to the packet. The memo from staff describes what I just kind of gave you a brief overview of. And if you like to act on it, obviously you're able to do that.
Thank you.
Any other questions or concerns? There are none. I believe there's a motion, a second, right? All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Thank you. Move on to number 5, consent agenda items for information.
Mr. Chair. I had a couple of questions from Pima County staff related to item 5B. And similar to the items from staff that I mentioned during the regional council meeting, I would like to request a written response in memorandum form to myself and the other members of the RTA board. But here are the questions, and I'll be emailing these to Ms. Ontiveros. It is unclear why the RTA surplus from fiscal year 21 was not applied to current RTA projects that are using non-RTA regional funding. Surface transportation, what does STGB stand for again?
Surface Transportation Block Grants.
Thank you. Or HERF 12.6 in place of RTA. It does not appear consistent with the 2014 RTA board action. A TIP amendment could be used to modify the funding, freeing up STBGP and HERF 12.6 to be programmed through the typical process with the TPC. Second, straight line projection for RTA revenue in fiscal year 22 is $107 million. This is a conservative estimate of what can be expected in fiscal year 22, since collections are stronger the latter half of the fiscal year. This will result in 13 million available to be used on RTA roadway projects, freeing up 13 million of supplanted non-RTA regional funds, again from STBGP and or HERF 12.6. So again, I will send those questions on, and if we get a written response, my staff and I'd be most appreciative.
Sure, Mr. Chair, Supervisor Scott, be happy to do that. Just to add to that conversation, those are ongoing conversations we're having with technical folks, both at TMC level as well as TPC. So we'll add that and provide those details to the TMC as well.
Excellent.
You know, we'll go to the item A, the meeting schedule and all that.
Again, all those items are for information. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
B or C. There are
No
none.
action, no action is required.
Yeah, if there are none, then we'll move to number 6. Board of Contractor RTA project signage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the RTA board. What we're asking this afternoon for is that the board approve a contract or award of contract with Sign Business, Inc. They do business as Graphic Impact for the fabrication, installation, and maintenance of construction signage at RTA funded construction sites, and to authorize the executive director to enter into a contract. We have gone through a solicitation process. We received 2 bids. They were evaluated by a 3-person team. Unanimously, we recommend that this award be given to Sign Business. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Let's have it. On to number 7, RTA next is the advisory committee, the CAC appointments.
Mr. Chair, if I may, Pocky is going to give us a presentation on that. We're really appreciative of the committee that was able to meet, especially it was during the holidays, and they had several meetings during the holidays, and we are really excited about being able to provide you their recommendation that you already have in your packet. And in addition to what you have in your packet, Pocky is going to talk about some other options that you have.
Thank you and good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the board. So today, as Farhad mentioned, I'm going to be discussing the RTA CAC appointments. And all of this is in your packet. I will be highlighting a few things and then giving you an update on some additional information. So as you know, the selection committee members consisted of your 2 RTA board officers, Mayor Bob Teso and Chairman Peter Ucapicio, as well as the 3 CAC officers, Chairman Tom McGovern, Vice Chair Carolyn Campbell, and Second Vice Chair Mary Veras. And they reviewed all the applications to fill the remaining CAC vacancies. So this, in terms of selection criteria, what the selection committee did is they were asked to consider the criteria that you see before you to recommend candidates to fill these vacancies. And this consisted of geographic representation, diversity of thought, economic representation, and demographic representation. And in your packet, there's a little bit more detail on each of the criteria. In addition, there was a geographic representation guideline that the selection committee considered per your suggested numeric framework. It was a guideline that they used when selecting candidates to fulfill a 35-member RTA CAC. And this originally consisted of 19 representatives from the city of Tucson, 7 from Pima County, 2 each from the towns of Marana, Oro Valley, and Sahuarita, and then 1 each from the city of South Tucson, Pasco Yaqui Tribe, and Tohono O'odham Nation. What the selection committee did when they were looking at their geographic representation is that they reviewed this representation of the current 22 CAC members and then the 91 applicants. They found that there were no applicants from the city of South Tucson or the Tohono O'odham Nation or the Pasco Yaqui Tribe. Per the suggested composition guideline that I just showed you, the RTA board's goal to include participation from these 3 jurisdictions may need to be addressed separately by you, the board. So the selection committee recommendations followed the up to 13 new members may be appointed by the board, and they ranked the top 10 candidates, and these were identified by the selection committee. They also identified 3 candidates as alternates if the board wished to not appoint the 3 jurisdictions that I just mentioned. And then they also added an additional alternate, a 4th candidate for consideration. An update that we learned this week was that one of the 3 alternate candidates did withdraw from consideration, and another one did not respond to the conflict of interest forms that I sent to all applicants to please fill out and submit. This means that the 4th alternate is now available for consideration. In the meantime, we did receive a proposed geographic representation from board member and supervisor Rex Scott. His proposal includes 10 top candidates plus 22 current members, which would be a 32-member committee. And per Supervisor Scott's recommendation is he would forego 2 of the Pima County top 10 candidates and add 2 of the city of Tucson alternates in their place, giving the city of Tucson 18 representatives, leaving the county with 8 representatives. The town of Marana would have 1 additional representative, which would bump it up to 3. And then the town of Oro Valley would remain at 2. Sahuarita would remain at 1. And then to be determined by you, we would have 1 representative from the city of South Tucson, 1 from the Pasco Yaqui Tribe, and 1 from the Tohono O'odham Nation. And this is more in line with the framework that I had explained earlier. And this is what it would look like with the proposed new CAC members per Supervisor Scott's proposal. You would have 9 new members from the city of Tucson listed here, and then 1 new member from the town of Marana. And then to be determined again, the 3 jurisdictions that are not representatives, city of South Tucson, Pasco Yaqui Tribe, and Tohono O'odham Nation. So the action for today is you are being asked to please consider appointments of the new CAC members, 2 terms, which sunset with the 22 members currently serving. And as a reminder, you approved the extension of the CAC through June 30th of 2024.
Any questions?
I do have some questions.
Mayor, they will- Go ahead, Mayor.
General?
No.
I like the recommendations, Supervisor Scott. I just want to make sure that it leaves the 3 open seats for the city of South Tucson and Puerto Rico Tribe and the Tohono O'odham Nation to fill still.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I think we should make it easy and let Supervisor Scott make that motion while we're all in a good mood. And
I believe Mr. General Maxwell had his hand after.
Well, I can wait for the motion.
Okay,
If there's
motion
one
then.
coming.
Is that
we
what
can
you want
then
to do?
Discussion, we can talk about it.
Any other discussions for the motion?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we had at the beginning of our, the way we were set up was that we picked the 13 candidates for these positions. The only concern I would have is that, we have to break away from that and whether the concern is, do the tribes want to pick their own or have an alternative method for filling their position is, I guess, up for discussion potentially. But my sense of the way I feel in terms of the way the selection committee worked, and I thank the committee because they did a great job, I believe. And the way it worked and turned out, I think we have the 13 candidates, but I just want to know what maybe the 2 tribes might have to say regarding accepting the 13 as originally as we were originally requested to do, or if we want to go ahead and find an alternative method of filling the 3 seats for Pascuayaki, Tohono O'odham, and for South Tucson.
Mr. Chair, if I may, Mayor Tesso, that is the proposal on the table to identify
Right.
3 additional members. And our recommendation would be to seek out applicants from each community. We would reach out to the chairs, obviously Chairman Norris and Chairman Yacovicio and yourself, and then try to do a targeted effort to seek applications from those areas and then bring those back for appointment by the board.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna agree to that, and almost, of course, it has to come to us at some point, but if there's a shorter process, because I think it's
Like
gonna be
an
difficult
appointment.
to find, almost an appointment.
From the tribe side.
From the tribe side, unless there's a conflict of interest or something legal. I don't think we have to go through an extended process. If we can find somebody. from
actually,
those
as long as
communities.
they're not an elected official or
Right,
something.
whatever the
I think
minimum
there's-
requirements are, I don't think it has to go back through this whole vetting process person.
I agree. Ned, how do you feel, Ned? Probably you appointing one and see if they'll accept.
No, I think that would probably be the best approach at this point, because I think, we take the time to, I guess, to definitely identify someone that we feel would be most beneficial, for their role on the CAC. So I think, I think we can go ahead and take the position that we'll go ahead and identify and submit that person's name to the review or to the process.
Thank you, Mr. Benavides. The questions for you is there anything that prevents us from doing that as tribes? Because that was requested.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, if I may, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, we'll be happy to follow up with obviously the 3 board members to facilitate that and bring the recommendation back to the board, hopefully at a future meeting. I need to also add that one of the reasons that this is really important and we really appreciate the proposal is that the previous CAC also had representatives from all jurisdictions. So we really want to make sure that we have representatives from all jurisdictions.
And Mr. Chair, it's always be my comment too. I think especially after the comments today earlier that were made, it's really critical both for both the nations as well as South Tucson to have a representative. And as long as there's no conflict, I would fully support just those three members of the council identifying the people they want, because you're gonna know who's gonna have the best interest. I do have one question though for Paki about it before we go forward. So you talked about two of the three, one of the alternatives self-eliminated themselves for consideration. The other one didn't submit the signed conflict of interest. And I guess my question is, how much do we push that? Or I'd hate to just say, let's take the alternative, the fourth alternative, or one of the earlier alternatives as ranked by the committee if the conflict of interest, but it's just a matter of getting the form filled out.
Right, no, there was a deadline of January 18th provided to all applicants, and those that didn't submit or were out of town, I followed up with them. This particular candidate, we spoke 2 times, apologized for not getting the conflict of interest form in, and said they would, and I was waiting and waiting because that day was the absolute drop deadline. I finally called back and he says, yeah, sorry for the he says, sorry for the tardiness at this point. I called him again, left him a message, email, and said, does this mean that you're not going to be submitting this? This is to confirm that you're not submitting your conflict of interest. And he just never, I said, I need a reply with your signed form. And he just said, I'm sorry for the tardiness, and did not submit it. So there was quite a bit of follow-up for that particular person.
Okay. Mr. Chair, Mr. Maxwell, if I may follow up as well. Additionally, that individual was a Pima County resident, so it would have really not be consistent with the proposal that we were discussing with Supervisor Scott.
Yeah, I was gonna, if I may add, the 2 that dropped, one was from the city of Tucson, one was from Pima County.
Thank you. Any other questions? Now, is there a motion to, another question?
Mr. Chair, I move that we appoint the proposed new CAC members, and that we also pursue filling the vacancies for the city of South Tucson, the Tohono O'odham Nation, and the Pasco Yaqui tribe.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Ayes have it. Move on to item number 8, Mr. Crude.
Okay, let's see if I've got my. There we go. All right. Mr. Chair, members of the RTA board, this is a continuing conversation that we're having regarding the cost to complete RTA projects. As you know, this is a challenge we've been working through for a number of months, and we'll be continuing to do so as we move forward through the conclusion of the RTA. In terms of where we are today, we are continuing to work on finalizing or refining our cost estimates so that we can identify what the need of what the need for funding is. We acknowledge that costs have increased from the ballot levels that were established back in 2006. We acknowledge that there are unforeseen costs. Archaeological, right-of-way, railroad are included in the most recent estimates. And there are still some projects that we're listing here that are carrying scopes that are somewhat larger than what were in the ballot. So in the scopes that were associated with the RTA plan. So with those caveats, we are trying to be responsive to Mayor Romero's request that we go through and identify specific dollar values for each of the projects where the funding is. And that is what we are going to be presenting today. In terms of we're going through all of the projects, the roadway element projects here. By ballot number. In some cases, we've got more than one phase. Oftentimes, we'll have the first phase fully funded, and the second phase would be the phase that is showing the gap. How we structure the funding is still up to you, but this is representative of the timeline of the delivery as well. We are showing the current cost estimate. The current cost estimate comes from one of several sources. If we don't have any project work that has been done on the project to date, we're utilizing the RMAP estimates that were done associated with the RMAP back in 2019. If we have more recent cost estimates done by the project design team, we use that instead. So we're trying to use the best available data that we have available to us. in terms of current construction costs. We know they're going to move, but we're using the best available data at this point. We are showing what is in the TIP currently in terms of existing funding. That's a blend of money in many cases. That's some of the regional funds, the 12-6 money, the STB monies that the Supervisor Scott mentioned earlier. It also includes, where committed, local funds. If you'll recall, in the RTA plan, we identified commitments that were made by each of the jurisdictions for other sources of funds, including development impact fee monies, in some cases construction sales taxes, 97 bond monies. All of those were in there, as well as funds that were already in the TIP, regionally programmed at the time of the RTA board, the RTA plan adoption. So that's the middle column there, the 2022 to 2026 TIP funding. Funding need is the gap, the difference between what the current cost estimate is, less the funding that's been identified. So that's the funding need on each of the projects. I'd be happy to go through any specific projects that you'd like to talk about. They're all presented to you here. I'm not going to dwell on any one of them unless you'd like. I will point out some highlights. We are, for instance, on First Avenue. I know there's a conversation going on regarding potentially rescoping it. I know the county has submitted a suggestion that perhaps we eliminate the project from First Avenue, or on First Avenue from Orange Grove to Ina. These are still being carried at their RMAP amounts. So where we may be talking about a 4 million, or rather a 4-lane divided that the city was suggesting was somewhere close to the ballot amount of $74 million, we're carrying $138 million in this estimate for First Avenue. We're still carrying the full amount that we think it will take to deliver First Avenue, Orange Grove to Ina as well. So that's kind of setting the stage here. I'm going to continue on down. Again, there are a variety of projects represented here. And again, by phases. For instance, we are showing 22nd Street, the phase that's about to begin. It's the project that the city has selected a construction manager at risk contractor for. We're showing that at 63 million in the TIP. We've got 64 million. The next phase, or the final phase, though, does not have an adequate amount of funding. It's also about $67 million for that final phase from Keno to I-10. We're showing most of that as being a funding need at this point. We're showing the first phase, or the nearest phase, funded, the later phase not funded. We look at a number of projects there in the middle of the 2022, 23. Those are projects that are being funded with federal monies. They're projects that have very, very broad scopes. Our position is that these can be, basically built to the budget project. So we're not showing any funding need on those. There's not a lot of specificity in the scope at this point.
I'm just curious, Mr. Chair, on that one, that the cost estimate is 67 million. The funding was 6. I know inflation could not be counted for all of that. How are we so far off on?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, this would be the third phase of the 22nd Street project. 22nd Street project was funded at $104 million. And as we're looking at the project, one of the things that was being proposed was to realign the roadway, and it would involve some additional costs in order to avoid right-of-way takes. So that's part of that. Part of it is that when you're dealing with the railroad is one of those areas where we found a lot of additional expense. And we've completed the Keno intersection. That was the first phase. That bridge over the railroad yard is quite a bit more expensive. It's not the last phase that's so expensive. It's just that's where the last phase to be delivered is the one where we're showing the gap.
Okay, gotcha. Thanks.
Okay. Continuing on, I'll go to the bottom line here. What we're showing is a current cost estimate for the remaining project. Well, before I get to the totals, I do also want to identify that for the projects above that I'd identified by project name are projects that have not yet gone to construction. We do have 2 projects that are presently under construction. They're at the bottom. We are being requested for additional funds to complete the Broadway Road project, Broadway Boulevard project, and the Downtown Links projects, both of which are currently under construction. They are a NOFA request that we received this summer. The number that we're carrying for that is $14.3 million. And when you add the projects that have not started to the funding needs for the remaining projects that are under construction, we're looking at a total amount of almost $820 million of project costs. We have programmed $467 million, almost 468. So we've got a gap of $366 million. I know the city had looked at their projects independently. There was a number previously discussed of somewhere in the $280 million range. That's for city-only projects. This is city plus everybody else projects is 366. So one of the things that we also recognize when we're doing our cost estimates, they're including everything that's built in the construction contract that the jurisdiction will put out. There are other sources of funds that go to meet that need. We have all along operated with the wet utilities being paid for by others. So it's the water and the sewer are handled under separate agreements, and we do not pay for them. They are, when we talk about exclusions or limitations on project, that's really the big one. There are other deals that are out there. We don't pay for dry utilities, TEP or others. If they're in there and they don't have prior rights, we don't reimburse them either. Utilities have their own source of funding, so that's the way we handle those. So what we did, we've looked at a range of projects that we've had in the past. We average, or if I look at a sampling of our prior projects, that utility adjustment or that utility amount has ranged between 2 and 12%, depending on the project complexity of it. For the purposes of this estimate, we took it at a 5% estimate. So I took 5% off of the construction cost. That's about almost $41 million. So the adjusted total, the amount of money that we have to find is $325.3 million. We have other monies that are not programmed. We have, as you know, last fall, I presented to you all a updated forecast from Eller. We are tracking with it to your question earlier, Supervisor Scott, the $107 million, we're tracking to that in the new estimate. Our budget, which is reflected in the staff report, was adopted before we had that information. So, but we are tracking to that dollar amount right now. We also do not include in this changes that we may see in other sources of funds. We don't yet know how much money we're going to get from STBG increases that might be coming out of the bill. We also recognize that the state HERF budget is performing better. So these are still things that will be additive to it. So what we've been doing is we've been looking at a range of estimates. When I talk about a revised funding need, I'm looking at what we believe our baseline estimate is that includes the updated Eller forecast, but not the state or federal dollars that are still out there that may be added. But with that Eller estimate, we believe we'll have $204.5 million over and above what we've already programmed. So that'll be applied or could be at your discretion. It is not for us to tell you how to spend the money. It is you to direct us on this. So if we get direction from you to apply those additional dollars to these projects, we can do that to the tune of about $204.5 million. We also believe that, as I mentioned, that's our baseline. We believe it's probably more optimistic than that based upon what we're seeing in these other sources of funds. So we use the optimistic forecast from Eller as well, and that shows about $247 million worth of revenue. So our gap, as we're projecting it, is between $78 and $120 million. We have not yet begun to tackle a number of other things. We've not yet begun to look at potential changes in scope. Remember, we're still carrying $138 million on First Avenue. We haven't touched that yet. We also have other questions that are being asked as well. We've had a proposal to eliminate a project. We've had proposals to expand projects. We've not incorporated the expansion of projects, with the exception of 2 projects. We've included expansion in Sunset, because Sunset, we don't have the ability to price out a project that complies with the ballot, because we cannot do an at-grade rail crossing. So we are carrying that in here. It will require your action for us to program that, but it's carried in this particular budget. We also have a design that's moving forward on part of Houghton Road. That project is being designed as a 6-lane roadway. I don't have a 4-lane roadway cost estimate. 4 lanes was what was in the ballot. We're moving forward with a 6-lane, but it's going to require that the board talk about it and decide that they would support that expansion. So moving on. I'm sorry.
Question. Over here, Mr. DeGrood. Can you go back to the slide you were just on? Where it says, should RTA board elect to apply unprogrammed funds? You said that's our decision. What's the process that we will go into for considering that decision?
I'm going to get to that in a moment. Oh, General Maxwell.
Mr. Chair, if I
go back to the
Mr.
same one.
DeGrood, no, I'm not. Just something caught my mind. We're talking about, we've already, First Avenue from Grant River has obviously been an issue that we've talked about before, and we're going to address again today. And we're working through the process to see what actually goes forward. And I understand that we're paying a lot of attention to that because it's went from 6 to 4. But how does a plan in the RTA plan go from 4 to 6 without going through the same process?
We're in uncharted territory. In the past, when we've gone to an expansion, and we only have a history of doing that on really one project, and that is the Camino de Mañana Twin Peaks Road project, where additional regional and local funds were brought to bear to cover the cost of expanding from what was a 2-lane roadway to a 4-lane divided roadway. That additional money was brought to bear, again, using regional and local sources. There was some 12.6 that was applied to it, and additional local funds came from the town of Miranda to fund it. We've always said, if you want to upgrade, great, bring the money to the party. So, pardon.
If I may add to that, Mr. Chair, Mr. Maxwell. So those are the kind of examples of scope expansions that, as Jim just mentioned, anytime there's a recommendation to expand the scope, as long as the funding comes with it, then that's typically an easier process. When we go to reduction and we go to eliminating a project, those are the ones that we're currently discussing. That'll come to you at a future time. But so far, as we mentioned, if there's an expansion and the local entity is willing to pay for the difference, then that is almost a very easy process, because it's an IGA agreement and including the additional funding coming from other sources.
So absolutely, fully understand that, Mr. Chair, Mr. Executive Director. I guess on this one, what I don't understand is it went from 4 to 6, yet we're showing we've got $15 million short.
Because the funding commitment is not there yet.
Okay.
One other question, and this is for the third time on behalf of Pima County staff. When they looked at the packet, their input was that the funding needs for Sunset did not appear accurate. They sent me a document titled Sunset Project Cost Tables. What I'd like to request is that if PAG staff could follow up with Pima County staff and rectify whatever discrepancy there was.
We'll be happy to, Mr. Chair, Mr. Supervisor Scott. As you know, Sunset is one of those projects that's going through the NOFA process. That's a separate process that we're at the direction of the board. We're working directly with individual applicants, going through their request, and that's a separate process from this process currently, because we hope to actually enter into an IGA relatively soon. So this information here was not updated based on that conversation.
Very good.
Thank you, and I appreciate your clarification on that, Ms. Mohimi, and that these are going to be moving. And, you know, we have now 3 or 4 different sets of numbers on Sunset. So this is reflective of what was asked for at the time of the NOFA back last summer. So there is some additional updates. We are probably a little more current with the city on their numbers right now because we've been engaging in a more of a dialogue with them.
And they did mention that our information was updated just last week.
Yes, as part of the NOFA discussion.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
The mayor, then we'll go to Mr. Maxwell. So, Mr. Bicker, do all the projects listed in this table, do they all have scope expansions?
No.
And is there some reason that we've lumped those scope expansion, that cost estimate that we haven't separated that out and identified what projects have scope expansions and which don't?
We are verbally identifying which projects have scope expansions. I don't have an alternative cost estimate to put into that. I'd be making it up. I'm using the best information that I've got right now.
So the example, if I may, Mr. Chair, Mayor Winfield, Helton is a good example. They actually proceeded with the 6-lane design, and that's the detailed cost estimate they have for a 6-lane design. So there was no additional work done on a 4-lane design, so there's no information to even generate that cost difference at this point. We can do that, but it's not there yet.
Mr. Chair, just one more clarification, because I would love to know, even without your cost estimate, which of these projects have scope expansions in it, so we know what we're facing right away. I think that was kind of along Mayor Whitfield's lines. But what ones are looking at scope expansions which play? I'm still confused on the house project. I'll talk to you offline on that one to get clarification on that. And then one last, before we go off this slide, so the TIP funding that we've got identified already for these projects, does that include the inflationary levels, as I understand?
Mr. Chair, General Maxwell, those are the best cost estimates current or as current as we have them. We have not attempted to try to forecast inflation into the future when they're delivered. We don't have necessarily start dates on all of these projects.
Mr. Chair, that's the question is really more on the funding side.
On the revenue side.
Yeah, on the revenue side, are we showing those with the inflationary costs versus the 206 battle language where appropriate?
The revenues that we are showing are consistent with the forecast that was in real dollars or nominal dollars, so including inflation dollars that were in the forecast that came from Eller this past summer.
Okay.
They're new.
They're new.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. I appreciate that.
So if I may, Mr. Chair, again, really the bottom line and some of the questions you're asking would actually help us narrow this range down. So when you look at 78 to 120, that range can be narrowed if we can carve out some of these items that are out of scope or expansions, or even some of the utility expenses. The 5% we went with just an estimate, but as we get more details on individual projects, that number can be as low as 78, very comfortably at that point. And that's the point I want to raise, is that let's assume it's $80 million at that point, and that's just revenue that we do not have. And in order to be able to complete the program, we're only talking about $80 million of potential overlap between the current plan and the next plan. So if the $80 million is how much we need and $100 million is generated in the first year of RTA Next, that's why we keep saying that it's manageable. You can easily move a couple projects into the RTA plan as proposed by Mr. Maxwell earlier, that those are still RTA 1 projects, but they're going to be funded with the first year of RTA 2.
And to that end, Mr. Chair, there are two other projects I want to point out. If you look at the top of this page, RTA ballot 31, we're showing Harrison Road, Golf Links to Irvington. We're showing a cost estimate of $8.2 million. That's for a standalone 2-lane bridge. We know the community wants, or the city is asking for, and the community out there is looking for an expansion. And that's a project that we don't have funding. It was not in the in the plan, it may be a project that should be considered as being an expansion in the early phases of RTA Next, when we can take the 8 million from this plan, add it to whatever additional funds that might be generated in the future, and build the project that the community wants. So anyway, oh, sorry.
Mr. DeGruda, it might be helpful just in terms of that scope expansion. You've got that note on the third page. If there was just an asterisk or something that tying it to the projects where you know there's a scope expansion, it would just give more clarity on this list.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Mayor Winfield, that's fine. I will also note that in the notes column on the right-hand side, I do try to add a little bit of detail in there that might be helpful. But in terms of identifying them and flagging them for you, we can certainly do that and make it more user-friendly.
Thank you.
And Jim, I have a question, Chairman. The conversations with the City of Tucson Transportation and Mobility staff continue, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. We haven't talked about this recently, like within the last month or two, but it was, this document in this form, in terms of the current cost estimates. I think some of the revenue numbers may have moved a little bit, but in terms of the cost side, these are numbers that we were in agreement with. We know that we are in agreement that these are the ones that closest represent what's in the ballot. They aren't necessarily what the city wants to build. We recognize that. That's another discussion that we need to have. But in terms of keeping it to what was in the plan and showing what it will take to deliver the plan, that's the numbers that we're presenting.
Any further questions on item number 8?
Oh, can I keep going?
I thought you were done.
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure we got all the questions.
Keep going then.
So, okay, all right. So where we are right now, we've got the 78 to 121 million, depending upon how rapidly we recover. It's also, we also have to recognize that costs may go up in a way that will be challenging as well. We are showing committed non-RTA revenue up to the level that's programmed in the plan. There is some local funding that's not up to the pledged amount on a couple of projects. There are a couple of projects that there was development impact fee money pledged. It isn't in there. It hasn't been programmed. It's a conversation that we're going to have. But we also recognize that if development didn't happen, there's not much money to come from it. So these are conversations that we'll have, and we'll have them on a project by project basis. I think they're pretty well known to staff which ones are the projects that we're looking at, and in aggregate it amounts to about $15 to $20 million amongst those projects. The other things, I remind you of the additional sources of funding that are out there available. I know that the town of Marana was very successful in getting additional funding for Tangerine Road in the last legislative session. I don't know if there's opportunities right now with the current legislature that I know they're dealing with a surplus. We're also looking at funds that might be available through the federal government. A lot of different opportunities to look at still to help working on that. There may be also opportunities to work with the development community if there are projects that are situated along corridors that are being slated for improvement. I know some of our projects that we have completed recently have spurred a lot of growth. And if there's a way to harness that, I know we've got Colburn, Valencia, we've got a lot of warehousing that's going on out there and development out there. And certainly in the town of Marana, the interchange out there at Twin Peaks certainly spurred some activity. So these are the kinds of things, if there's a way to harness that, this would be another way we can look at addressing that. And then there's certainly the RTA Next revenues.
I may add to that, if you don't mind, go back to that slide again. And we've talked about this before, Mr. Chair. I apologize. We've talked about it before, but I really want to highlight the conversation on federal grants. We know that if we can close this gap by going after some federal grants, that's very doable. And prioritizing RTA projects for pursuing those grants, really, I think that's a direction that we want to have from this body at some point, that if we're going to pursue those federal grants, to make sure that we can help close this gap with those grants. And there are projects that we know very, very specifically, those are the projects that would compete really well. And if you show the match, which is the RTA match, if you got 80% match and 20% to Friendship Bridge, for example, those are going to compete really well. So we'll bring those to you as we get more details on those grants.
Mr. Chair, because isn't it typical if you have a project, well, one, it's going to approve, two, it's designed, on and on and on, but doesn't that always make it much more
It's shovel ready.
eligible and shovel ready? Right?
Shovel ready, and the match is really important. We don't know what's going to be the match requirement on some of these grants.
Because
Like
they
I
can
said,
expand their use of their money if we're bringing 20 or 30%.
exactly. In the old days, it used to be 80-20, so that you had to have 20% match. If we overmatch by 80%, I think that really increases your chances.
Mr. Chair, real quick, I'd like to that point too. I think this is also an opportunity with the bill that's got funding. And Mayor, you've been back several times. You know what's available to us out there. If there's a potential of looking at some of the projects we've got and where maybe the shortfalls are, what they are, and see if there is some of these that even not straight like a bridge construction, but perhaps something that goes towards some of the living street or complete street requirements and desires. It's just those little stuff, and having that money there that's already dedicated towards the project makes the federal government's money go a lot further, and they like that, the grant process. So it's not just, the ones that we know on the hardball, the hard road constructions. We may be able to leverage other ones to either incorporate some changes that the municipalities are looking on these in the projects and not have it be part of the RTA assessment as well. A lot of opportunities, and we don't know, and I know ADOT's committed to keeping in touch with the regions about, as we learn more about the grant process and procedures and what they're going to be, as well as the additional dollars that may come down to PAG, RTA, to PAG specifically for potential inclusion in finishing some of these projects.
Okay, in terms of next steps, we do have the project review task force. We'll talk about that in a moment. On the 3 projects that were brought before the TMC. I'll talk about that in a moment. To look at where there might be either some cost savings opportunities, project design changes that might serve us well in terms of meeting the funding needs. In terms of how we deal with the financing, these projects are going to be coming out over a period of time. They're going to be the costs are not fully known at this point. This is our best guess. But as we move forward, both with a better understanding of our revenue as it's program or as it's received and realized, as well as the cost, we will recommend that we continue to looking at these projects annually to program the available funds as they're available to us to meet the project additional funding needs. We do need to continue to talk about scopes, and we do want to try to refine both those scopes and look at where there are scopes that may be expanded from what we were contemplating in 2006, that those projects may be ones that should be contemplated for continuation into the next one, particularly if they come with a big price tag and a big performance improvement from mobility. So that, Mr. Chair, is my presentation.
Any further questions on this item?
Mr. Chair, if I could, one more. I know today's been a lot of talking, but what part of what we approved earlier also makes that potential shift into RT next more defined now for the municipalities. We've said we're going to front load them, and we're going to consider them RTA 1 projects. So why we say they're going to be inclusion into RT next, it's just really important to remember when we go back to the municipalities and to the voters that no, this is the commitment to get RTA 1 complete. And it's not, while it's in that plan that's going to the voters. Remember, we're cutting the original RTA 2 years short if we go in 2024, for example. So it all works, but we just got to remember that's what we're driving towards.
Further? Thank you, sir. Move on
Thank
to
you.
item number 9.
Okay. I'll be real brief on this. We have continued to have discussions regarding the 3 projects that were submitted in response to our outreach, looking for project suggestions from the various jurisdictions. They're on RTA 13 First Avenue, Orange Grove Road to Ina, RTA 14 First Avenue Grant to River, and RTA 5 Silver Bell Road, which is scoped in this is the section north of El Camino del Cerro, which is currently scoped as a 3-lane project, and there's a request to widen it to 4 lanes. Really, when we look at these requests that we got, they're in 3 broad categories: project elimination, scope reduction, and scope expansion. As we talked through this with the technical management committee, there was a great deal of hesitancy about eliminating any projects, not without thoroughly looking through these projects and making sure that no mode is left behind, if you will. Yeah, we may say there isn't we don't have a need for adding additional travel lanes for vehicles, but we may still need the connectivity for pedestrians and bicycles. So they want to move very cautiously with any scope eliminations or project eliminations. The scope reduction, they also take that very seriously. We know a lot of work was put in on First Avenue. We heard that loud and clear. What we want to do is make sure that everybody's comfortable moving forward with this, and we have a conversation with all of the parties at our level, in addition to the one that is taking place within the city. The task force is being convened. We hope to meet next week, have our first meeting of the project, the ad hoc project review task force, which we're reprising from the one that we had done back in 2018 that looked at Broadway and downtown Lakes and others. We would be bringing that group back together with some new members. Unfortunately, the former chair passed away, Mr. Sella, but we do have a plan to bring that group back. It's going to be comprised of non-jurisdictional members of the TMC, and they'll be making a recommendation to the broader TMC, which then we in turn would bring back to you. So that's the plan at this point. We are looking at something that we will probably be bringing back in either May or May, something to begin the conversation with the board in terms of trying to make some decisions. Maybe longer. It depends on how fast this group works through it, but they have committed to doing bi-weekly meetings so they can bring this thing along so that we're not leaving these projects hanging. We know that there's a lot of effort that's been invested in these, and but there are also big questions that we need to make sure we're all comfortable. Mr. Mogini, did you have anything?
Thank you. That was really good, comprehensive. I just want to add that the TMC obviously discussed this item at 2 separate meetings. Mr. Huckleberry was the one that suggested for input from everyone. So far, we received only 3 projects for input. If there are any additional projects, we would welcome additional suggestions as well. But really, the thought process was to try to close that gap again, the gap that I keep talking about, 78 to 120. And if you look at just these 3 projects, they're over $125 million, just those 3 projects. So if we're talking about, are we getting closer to a solution? My answer is yes. Only looking at those 3 solutions, the 3 projects, you could address the gap issue.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate working with the TMC and doing it cautiously, because part of my always thinking is the long game for me is the next RTA. And when you're doing these projects so close to the end, keeping the voters in mind that anytime you change on those, I just think you have to be cautious, because making sure we have a lot of input on that, because I think it could jeopardize potentially, promises made, not kept. So that's kind of one of those, just wanting to be careful.
I appreciate that. It goes back to what, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, that goes back to what Jim was saying, that the TMC members were a little bit concerned about eliminating any projects. Those might be good candidates to take to RTA next and have it go through the process. So if we do change or eliminate a project, it goes through that process.
Any other discussion on this item? There are none. We'll move on to item number 10, adjournment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
Everybody says much more efficient. I don't know what happened.
After all this thinking, so- You got it.